People are getting sicker and fatter and more miserable. It's what you're eating. It's what you're exposing yourself to. The amount of chemicals in the food we eat in America is insane compared to the rest of the world. My mom was extremely ill. My dad was extremely ill. And we were just starting to be like, let's try to get like life back up again. And then it was like, wham, hit piece from the Sunday Times. My dad was extremely depressed. So he was already taking antidepressants at the time and was like, I think Mikhaila has what I have.
What does it feel like to someone who's never experienced depression?
But being depressed just...
Mikhaila, thank you so much for coming on the Iced Coffee Hour. We really appreciate it. We're huge fans.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So, of course, we first heard about you through Jordan. Then I got interested in your story, and it is so fascinating and impressive. So you had a multitude of different like ailments and diseases, and you claim that you're like allergic to like everything.
Unfortunately, yeah. I'm glad that's what I'm known for. I tried to start the I have a podcast, and I tried to start that and be like, okay, I'm going to try and do something other than that, but it's with me still.
The thing is,
I'm okay with it.
When you search, like when I was doing research on you, it's the only thing that came up consistently. Like you have to search for anything else other than that because those are the most popular videos that you have.
It's not even a bad thing, I don't think.
But it's impressive because you like overcame all of that stuff.
Yeah. You want to hear details?
First, I would love to go into your upbringing and your story. So there's this famous story that you grew up in like a small house with 300 paintings in this house. Okay. And one night you were woken up because a painting of Lenin fell on your head.
Yeah.
So this is true. It actually woke you up, a painting in your room of Vladimir Lenin?
Yeah. So my dad started buying Soviet art when I think I was in grade 6. Pretty tiny house. Paintings covered everything. There were hundreds and hundreds of paintings in there. And then when I left for university, they because I didn't want any Lenin paintings in my room when I was growing up as a kid, which I think
Lenin
is reasonable.
Specifically, or just like general,
well,
like
I didn't
Russian?
Want the scary ones because there were war paintings, there were Stalin paintings, Lenin paintings.
Were they like violent paintings?
Yeah, like paintings of war scenes.
How old are you?
I think when they started getting bought, I was 11 or 12. I think I was 12.
Did you have a say and say like, I don't want this above my bed?
Not once I left for university. So it was after I left for university, I came back and my room was filled with Lenin paintings because I'd been like, no Lenin paintings in my room when I was a kid and a teenager. And yeah, I was lying in bed at night and this huge, probably 7-foot by 4-foot painting of Lenin, fell on me.
Were they expensive?
Wham.
Like, I'm curious how much they were.
So they weren't allowed to export any art in the Soviet Union when there was a wall up. So all the countries in the Soviet Union had tons of art and the government paid people to make propaganda art too. So there was a lot of art stuck in there. And when the wall came down, a lot of these people who'd collected pieces of art for years put them on eBay to sell them. And they were extremely cheap. Like we didn't have a lot of money before we started getting business opportunities and dad went viral. We really didn't have very much money. He was spending some money on art, but it was dirt cheap. And it was quite a bit for people who were like stuck in the Soviet Union times. But no, it was cheap on eBay in like 6, 5.
And what was it about those pieces of art that made him want to collect them?
I mean, he's always done work in trying to understand evil, like malevolence in people and how entire societies can go towards evil. So Nazis, what happened with the Soviet Union where like people were going to the government, telling on their brothers and their parents, and the government would get involved. And I think, one, he thought it was beautiful. Like he's always been very into design and how things look. But I think the historical significance of how a culture can get like saturated with that kind of evil has just obsessed him. So I don't know why he wanted to necessarily bring it into the house. It's like a nice calm house.
Sure.
I also didn't know for a really long time. I didn't know that other houses weren't exactly like that. Like I went over for play days and I was like, this is a nice house. But it wasn't until I went to university when I was like, oh, we had like 32 different paint colors in our house and it was covered in Soviet art. And it wasn't until I was like 23 that I thought, oh, that was unique.
I'm sure you're used to, at this point, very interesting like table talk and discussions and philosophical discussions. Did these like thrill you as a kid? Or do you think that like you were kind of just like, whatever, like I'll placate these conversations?
No, they weren't boring for sure. Like dad definitely brought it down to like my brother and my level when we were a kid. So I grew up knowing the psychological significance of the biblical stories, mostly focusing on the Old Testament. And so I knew the background of these things, and he taught me about like Egyptian mythology and Greek mythology, and I always thought that was fascinating. So no, it wasn't boring or like he was lecturing at me or anything. It was interesting. But it definitely, I mean, that's been my entire life. I thought those were normal discussions.
But were you ever naturally rebellious to that? Because I know a lot of kids, like especially when the parents are like trying to force some sort of thing on their not force, but like, you know, being very outwardly about their opinion on something. Like kids are like, no, I don't believe that. Like actually,
not really. Like I was rebellious in other like horrible like ways as a teenager, like sneaking out, drinking, doing things like that. Rebellious. So no, we've had disagreements about like certain things over the years, but nothing major. It wasn't like ideology that we argued about. It was more like, I want to go party and I probably shouldn't. And why am I not allowed? And I'm going to do it anyway type of conversations.
How inquisitive would you be on that? If he tells you no to something, would you naturally question it and wonder why?
Everything was a negotiation. And if we ever had a disagreement in the family over like chores or things, then it was sit down at the kitchen table and we're going to sit here until this conversation is finished and there are no more snakes under the rug, which was intense. So we'd be there for like 3 hours trying to, you know, why do I have to clean this area of the house or just simple things like that.
Which views would you say were like most strongly implemented into you as a kid? Which belief systems? Like, okay, I believe in honesty. Which virtues?
Probably being skeptical of authority. I don't know if you would call that a virtue.
Although
I think it's a virtue now for sure. And maybe it's always been a virtue. But I think skepticism of authority. So I remember in grade 3 or 4, we were told we weren't allowed to pick up snow outside because they didn't want people making snowballs and throwing them at each other. And my dad's rule was, don't listen to stupid rules. It doesn't matter who makes the rule. Don't listen to stupid rules. You have to be prepared to deal with the consequences of not listening to those stupid rules, but you don't have to listen to them. And he put that in from like a moral perspective. Like it's not wrong of you to not listen to stupid rules, even if there are repercussions. And then I guess the other one would be, I mean, it was hammered into me from a really young age to tell the truth. You know, when you have something you want to say and you're like, maybe I shouldn't say it, even that's a type of lie that you shouldn't do. So it was truth, and then it was don't listen to stupid rules. I think those were probably the 2 lessons.
How do you know it's a stupid rule, though? Because I'd imagine the teachers don't think that's a stupid rule.
Yeah, and I think that's what plays into like tell the truth. It is hard to decipher. And I think that's why America is also so split nowadays, because like what's a stupid rule? And the Republicans will say, well, these are stupid rules. And then liberals will have the opposite point of view. No, those are good rules. So it's tricky. I guess he just let us loose with our own morals. Like, you guys can decide what stupid rules are. But I think he classified not being able to pick up snow as a stupid rule.
And as he started to gain in popularity, how did that affect the family dynamic in your life?
It was pretty awful, honestly. It was like 2016 when he first had a video that went viral.
Was that the Bill C-16 video?
Yeah, it was.
That's the first time I saw.
Can you explain it, Jack, for those that...
Okay, so I might butcher this, but you let me know. Okay, so basically the Canadian government was trying to implement Bill C-16, which mandated preferred speech, basically. So like if someone asks you to call them a certain pronoun, you have to do that, and it's punishable by like a criminal offense or something like that. And he was very outspoken against this bill. And then there was an argument outside of campus or within campus between him and a bunch of other students.
I was at that.
You were at that. That must have been scary
beginning.
For you.
Yeah, a little bit. It was.
Because that's combative. That was like high, intense
argument. It was yelling. Oh, and they were blasting. What are those horns? So you could hear them speak. Air horns. Yeah. So it was stressful. And it wasn't fun at the beginning. Like it was way more fun now. But at the beginning, it was, is dad going to lose his job at the university, which was his main source of income? And that was a serious possibility because people were posting things on his doors and like he couldn't really get to his office easily. Some of his friends, or who he thought were his friends, were taken aback by what he was saying. So he lost a whole bunch of friends. So it was like, who are our friends now? And we just became aware of this political divide that we hadn't been aware of before. Things didn't really calm down until like 2021. So it was stressful for like about 5 years.
Being put up against so much adversity, does it actually make you reconsider some of your opinions, or did it solidify those opinions? Because like, okay, I see your best argument and I think that what you're doing right now is really aggressive and it's an emotional based argument. Okay, I am 100% firm in my beliefs. Or are you like, well, once, dad's friends start to get upset at him and then I see like, signs on our doors and I see all these hate comments, like maybe I could be wrong on this.
Not really. That didn't happen to me anyway. Mostly because if you like say the event that we were talking about where everyone's yelling at him outside the campus, the people yelling at him are like lunatics. Like, so you look at them and you're like, who's the reasonable person in this conversation? Is it the people screaming? Although dad was like, had raised his voice at that point too. Everyone was yelling. But it was pretty clear to me that people who were going against him, that there was something off there. So I don't think I reconsidered any of my points because of the pushback, or any of his points because of the pushback.
Who is your father to you other than your dad? Was he someone you looked up to as an idol?
I definitely looked up to him growing up. Otherwise, I don't think I would have gone into psychology and classics and been interested in the same kind of ideas. So I definitely looked up to him. And then now my husband and I actually am managing his social media and brand and doing like negotiations and things. So now he's also my boss somewhat. There's a weird family dynamic, but it works out. I tried to hand off the job a bunch of times, but since we got more well-known, people appear and they'll like, oh yeah, I'll help you. And then it turns out they're just after money or something. So I've tried to like hand off his brand or hand off negotiations and things. And it's mostly just turned into people trying to screw us over, which is why we've kept it in the family.
Yeah.
I imagine that's brought you guys all a lot closer together. Like all of these controversies and like crazy experiences and people like hating.
Yes, it has. I'm definitely way closer with my mom. I was also so young. Like when this started, I was 23 or 22. So I'd just gotten over the teenage years where you're already kind of like fighting with your parents and things. I'm definitely closer with my family. I think my entire family is closer, but it's hard to tell because we're also older. I think it's solidified trust between us though, that we wouldn't have necessarily had because we've had to like band together to get through some of these things.
Although before we go into that, if you have a website, you know how important it is to be on the first page of Google. But not only that, even if you're on the first page of Google, the first 3 results get the vast majority of traffic. So if you're not there, you're missing out on a lot of growth.
The problem, though, is that navigating the world of SEO can be incredibly challenging unless if you have access to the right tools, like our sponsor, Ahrefs. Ahrefs is the go-to SEO software for professionals worldwide that is everything you need to rank higher and get more traffic. With Ahrefs, you can conduct in-depth keyword research, spy on your competitors, track your ranking positions, and even perform comprehensive site audits all in one place.
For example, with the Organic Keywords Report, you could see the keywords that any website or URL ranks for and get an estimation for the amount of search traffic that each keyword generates. You could also use the Top Pages Report to see the URLs that drive the most search traffic to a given site, as well as the estimated traffic value and top organic keywords that they rank for too. Right now, you could run unlimited site audits, check keywords, and backlinks for free by signing up for Ahrefs Webmaster Tool at ahrefs.com/AWT. Again, that's ahrefs.com/AWT, or you could click the link in the description.
Thank you so much, Ahrefs, for sponsoring this episode, and back to the podcast. So on the topic of health issues, which is like the thing that, like we were mentioning before this podcast, like when we search up your name, that's like all of the results because of just how extreme it seems.
It was really bad, yeah.
What is it that you currently are eating?
I'm just eating ruminant meat, which is like lamb, beef, bison.
And to be clear, there's nothing else in your diet other than meat.
There's salt
Vodka?
and occasional vodka, yeah. That vodka just like destroys. They're like, oh, it's a health diet, but there's also vodka. But
we're talking like no vegetables, breads,
absolutely not. No
sauces,
no,
nothing.
Salt.
Okay, so to explain these drastic measures, what was your experience that made you determine, okay, I just need to eat meat?
Yeah.
Because we discussed earlier that you were suffering from a lot of like chronic illnesses, like Lyme disease and
arthritis, celiac disease, leaky gut.
I think the worst one was I was extremely depressed. So I was on antidepressants from the age of 12 till I kind of figured out that diet could alleviate those symptoms when I was 23.
How do you know you're depressed at 12?
I got angry at somebody for not following the rules of a game we were playing. I was 12, right?
I thought it was a stupid rule.
It was like, you're not following the rules. This isn't fair. But I remember going inside, slamming the door, going into my room, slamming the door and sitting on my bed and being like, I can't control my anger. I was aware enough to be like, I don't think this level of anger is appropriate for someone who's breaking the rules of a ball game. So that was one thing, but it wasn't actually like, I didn't really clue into it. Because I was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, they give really chronically ill kids a psychiatrist usually to try and, I don't know if that even helps, but like, good luck. You need someone to talk to. Like, your life is not great. And the psychiatrist gave me the Beck scale, and a Beck scale gives you questions like, do you have suicidal thoughts? Do you ever feel it would be better off if you weren't around? Sad questions like that. And then you rate it on a scale. So it's pretty objective. But my parents had sent me to them or had encouraged me to go because my dad was extremely depressed too. So he was already taking antidepressants at the time and was like, I think Mikhaila has what I have. Because we've got this severe depression that's run through my family, like my great grandpa, my grandpa, my dad. And then it hit me. That's what we thought at the time anyway. And so I was diagnosed by a psychiatrist when I was 12.
What does it feel like to someone who's never experienced depression?
You know, when you go into a really like a dark alley or a scary neighborhood and it feels like someone might jump you and you're like kind of on high alert and you're like looking around and just hyper stimulated and aware. It's that feeling all the time. Or it's the feeling like your dog that you've had since you were a kid is dying. It's like this deep grieving pain almost. It was easier to identify what depression felt like when it finally lifted. And what changed for me was my thought patterns changed. So instead of being like something bad is going to happen, all the problems in my life turned into opportunities. So like, here's a challenge. And it wasn't like my life is going to be over because I have this challenge. It was, oh, I can beat this challenge and then there'll be new opportunities. But being depressed it just destroys your life. So I had arthritis, and the arthritis was the worst arthritis my kid rheumatologist had seen in 25 years of treating kids with arthritis. I had my hip and ankle replaced when I was 17. It was catastrophic. And the amount of like pain I had from the arthritis wasn't even comparable to what the depression felt like.
What does it feel like to have arthritis?
It's like what you would imagine an old person would feel like. It's like all your joints are stiff and painful. And then for the hip and ankle, like the cartilage, literally my body ate the cartilage away. So it was just bone on bone. And at that point, it's excruciating.
Do you think depression can be solved for anybody?
Yeah, I do. I think it depends what's causing it. Part of what I tell people if they have chronic illness is you need to figure out how to fix it. It's fixable. Like people aren't born to have some sort of now say that there are genetic abnormalities that could be different. I don't believe the genetic abnormalities for depression, and I do think that if you have any type of chronic illness you need to go and search out for the answers, and the mainstream medical system doesn't cover chronic illness very well. So if you have any type of chronic illness like autoimmune, any type of like psychiatric or long-term problem, you'll go to the doctor and they'll say here's a drug, it'll help, but it won't cure you. There's no cure. Right. So if you have arthritis, they'll put you on immune suppressants. It might help. There's a host of side effects, but it won't cure you. And you're diagnosed with multiple joint replacements in the future and an early death if you have autoimmune disorders. And the medications don't prevent that. So like none of it works. So go out and look in a different direction. And what I tell people to do is at least start with diet. It's like that's changed my mom's on the diet. My dad's on the diet. I'm on the diet because we all have different weird autoimmune things going on. But that's usually where I tell people to start. So no, I think depression is curable. Even if it's some sort of PTSD depression, I think there are things you can do about it. And it's just hopeless if you think, I'm stuck with this forever. This is just me. I don't believe that.
And what made you think that you should try out diet rather than all of these other remedies when you're suffering from all of these ailments?
So I was diagnosed in grade 2, and I didn't delve into diet really until I was 23. So it was mostly because I was like, well, the mainstream medical route isn't working. I've had a hip and ankle replacement when I was 17. I was like, I'm screwed. And when I was 23, I was like, I had dropped out of university because I was too sick and I had chronic fatigue at that point too. And I was like, I can't make it to my final exams. That's it. I went into makeup school, much to my dad's chagrin. He was like, you're not going to be intellectually stimulated there. And I was like, you don't know me, Dad. So I went into makeup school for like a semester, and my wrist was so sore because you stand all day and you do someone's makeup. And I was like, I can't even use my wrist. Like, what am I doing in makeup? It's like me becoming a surgeon or something. This is ridiculous. And at that point, I went to my doctor. And I was like, I think my wrist, because it really hurt. And I was like, I think it's headed in the same direction as my hip and ankle. And he was like, oh, joint replacements are really rare at your age. I was like, I've had 2. Like they don't seem that rare. And that's when I decided to go into biomedical science at a different university and just figure out what was wrong with me. I did my entire family's genetics through 23andMe to see if there was any type of pattern, which showed genetics for celiac disease. And so I cut out gluten, and my health improved a little, like the tiniest bit, enough that I was like, okay, maybe I'll go on an elimination diet. And I was encouraged by my mom, who kept dragging me to, like over the years, I was brought to, I don't know how many like witch doctors and naturopaths, just like anything being like here. And that had initially backfired because you go to a naturopath, they sell you like $200 of supplements. None of the supplements do anything. And I was like, these, quacks are just taking advantage of sick people to push supplements on them. And that's terrible to take advantage of sick people. So I was really averse to that. But she did drag me to a naturopath when I was 23 who suggested an elimination diet. And I kind of looked at it and said, this doesn't make any sense, and came up with my own just to give it a shot. And that diet helped a whole bunch of my symptoms in like a month. It was crazy.
But before we get into that, I'm sure you know as well as us that there is really only one foolproof way of becoming a millionaire by the end of your life, and that is investing.
I completely agree with that. I've been investing since I was a teenager, and it's given me not only a lot of confidence, I love it. It's so much fun for me to see what's going on in the markets every day. I love seeing my money grow over time. It's something that, like, every day I wake up and I check the market to see how I'm doing. And one of the ways I do that, believe it or not, is by reading our sponsor, Yahoo Finance.
Yahoo Finance is a completely free website, and I kid you not, I was reading this website when I was like 13 years old, just getting involved in the markets. You can literally just type in a ticker symbol, and it gives you basically all of the data that you would ever need to know if you're wanting to invest in a company.
And this is just a really cool full circle moment for me because I've been reading Yahoo Finance for a very long time. So to see them come and sponsor one of our episodes is so unbelievably cool. And if you want to support that, the link to them is down below in the description. I highly recommend checking them out. It's totally free. I come up with some of my video topics, by the way, from Yahoo Finance. Highly recommended.
So with that said, thank you so much, Yahoo Finance, for sponsoring this episode. And thank you guys so much for checking it out. And back to the episode. Was it just like a natural allergy to a bunch of different foods? Or do you think this diet would work for anybody?
I call it the lion diet. I named that a number of years ago. Not sure how I feel about it, but that's what it's called. And it seems like people with severe chronic illness, if they limit their food to just beef, even if it's for like 6 weeks and then reintroduce other foods, then they can monitor flare-ups. And it seems to work. And I know how that, like, crazy that sounds, but there's more evidence, and a bunch of it's coming out of Harvard now, for ketogenic diets treating cancer or treating autoimmunity or treating psychiatric diseases. That's a big one. There's a doctor named Chris Palmer that is saying, hey, medications don't really work. Like, psychiatric illnesses are a metabolic disease, and you can treat that with a ketogenic diet. Technically, the diet I'm on is a ketogenic diet. It's just plant-free.
It seems counterintuitive to like everything that I've learned about nutrition, you know, growing up like through the public school system and everything. And I'm not a nutritionist, obviously. It seems questionable. Do you think that this exact diet, this lion diet where you're just eating straight beef and salt, could work on everybody? Or do different people respond differently to varying foods?
From what I've seen, it works overwhelmingly well for people with autoimmune or psychiatric illnesses or obesity problems. I don't know about the other illnesses. So no, I do think it works for that. I don't think the average person needs to be as restrictive as me. Like, I was really, really sick. I've seen a lot of people who have arthritis that go on a ketogenic diet or go on a paleo diet and cut out processed foods and cut out dairy and cut out some inflammatory foods, and they see their symptoms lower. But if people have like 3 different autoimmune disorders and can't get out of bed and they've been treated through the medical system and it's not working, then this is what I generally suggest people try.
I wonder how much of that is purely because you're not eating a lot of the crap that's out there.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I mean, people say that, but what I started on, so in 2017, the elimination diet I did wasn't just meat. Like, it took a while to get that because I was also unaware that you could survive only on meat because nobody knew that. So I did like lots of greens, certain fruit. I was eating like apples and pears and things, meat in general, fish. And it was more like I cut out all the soy, dairy, any processed foods, grains. I cut out eggs too, because I know a lot of people have egg allergies, nuts. Like, I cut out everything you could be allergic to and just kept like I said, greens and certain vegetables, fruit, and meat. And that almost got rid of all my symptoms. I got off of all my medication on that diet. So I wasn't just on a meat diet. I was on like more of a paleo diet. And that worked. As soon as I got pregnant, my arthritis came back, even though I didn't change what I was eating. And I was like, okay, what is this about? And then I also moved into a house that I know that had black mold in the basement. And I think that flared my autoimmune symptoms. At that point, I couldn't get them under control again. And I was like, there's no way I'm going back on medication. I'm just going to keep removing foods until it goes away, because it went away. And it was gone for like a year and a half. And then I got pregnant and came back, and I was like, it's got to be diet related. So then I just slowly cut down. I cut out all the fruit, which was awful. And then I just slowly cut down the vegetables. And then I came across a Joe Rogan episode with Sean Baker. And he was like, yeah, I only eat steak. And I was like, okay, so people can only eat steak. That's great. I'll do that for a while. So I switched to doing that for a while. And then every time I tried to reintroduce something, I'd have these inflammatory reactions, which was like depression mostly. That was the worst symptom, but also like arthritis and my skin breaking out. But it was mostly the depression that was awful. And so I just stopped reintroducing things.
So I'm really curious, do you think there's a chance that it's a bit of a placebo effect?
No.
And why do you say that?
I had my hip and ankle replaced from arthritis. There's nothing that can placebo that kind of arthritis away. I do get that question.
Yeah.
It's a fair question.
I've always been
if
curious
there's a
about
placebo
that. Yeah.
effect that's that strong, I'm all for it. I think what's happening is the environment we live in now compared to how we lived 150 years ago is full of like different exposures to different things, where like molds, the food we eat is crazy right now. Like the amount of chemicals in the food we eat in America is insane compared to the rest of the world.
The cancer warnings everywhere you go. It's like, oh, this is known to, cause cancer in this. It's like, we're eating at like a restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. People's bodies are completely overwhelmed, which is why it's like 1 in 5 people have an autoimmune disorder. I can't remember what the psychiatric illness numbers are, and they've skyrocketed since COVID. People are getting sicker and like fatter and more miserable. And I think it's environmental. It's what you're eating. It's what you're exposing yourself to, because it wasn't here, 150 years ago like this.
So this is something I've tried recently. So January 1st, I wanted to lose a little weight and I wanted to get in better shape. So I tried I think the proper term is like the caveman diet. You're just supposed to eat like whole foods, nothing fried, nothing processed, no alcohol. And I did that. And the first week, I remember how difficult it was to find foods that were not processed, like just purely natural foods. It's really difficult.
Yeah.
And so I had to go out of my way to find these foods and then consciously eat them. And then every restaurant I go to, I'd look at the foods and I'd be like, I can't eat this, I can't eat this.
Yeah.
And it was like 80% of the menu you can't even touch. So then I'm eating like fish, vegetables, steaks, chicken, stuff like this. In the first month, I think I was down like 5 pounds.
Yeah.
Which is just from doing that. Like I'm not doing any extra exercise. It's purely just from eating well. And so I stuck with it. And so even now, like I try to stick with it, but it is difficult.
So in 2017, I basically did that and it got rid of almost all my symptoms. Like my chronic fatigue, I was taking Adderall for chronic fatigue because I was sleeping 18 hours a day and I was exhausted most of the time. I got off of Adderall, I got off of the antidepressant, I got off of the immune suppressant, I got off of the antihistamines I was taking every day. I was taking an antibiotic for this rash that just wouldn't go away. I got off of everything on that kind of diet. And I went from like being able to eat out with my friends to being like, I guess I'll just come join you, but I'm not going to eat anything. Unless you're going to cook at home, it's hard. Luckily, in like places like Austin and LA, like it's becoming more popular to not cook with seed oils and to have gluten-free items. And it's growing in popularity. Compared to 2016, there was nothing. It was miserable. So I get it. I get the pain. But if you order just steak, I mean, that opens a lot of restaurants up.
What are the downsides, though, to such a diet? Like, are you worried about cholesterol? So saturated fats.
When you have an autoimmune disorder and it goes away, you don't really care what the repercussions are. Like people are like, well, you were worried you're going to die earlier. It's like, not really, because I was dying and now I'm not. So I don't really care what anything says. But because there are people following me, I've done research into like cholesterol and saturated fats and all these concerns. All of the studies done on red meat were epidemiological studies that don't actually conclusively prove anything unhealthy about red meat. So if you actually look at the science, Max Lugavere is actually really good. He kind of talks like about a diet like you're doing. If you're just eating meat, your cholesterol does go up. But cholesterol, the research done around cholesterol causing heart disease and that is iffy at best too, if you look into it. So there's a doctor named Ken Berry that delves into that. I'm not the best person to talk to about the scientific evidence of only eating meat. I mostly tell people, hey, I was like dying with like 4 different things and on all these medications and now I'm healthy. I've been doing this diet for like 6.5 years.
Yeah.
You could do it for 6 weeks and see how you feel. And then
When's the last time you cheated on the diet?
I don't cheat, like ever. So I've never cheated on the diet. I've tried to reintroduce foods very carefully. The first time was in 2020. So that was 3 years into the diet. And I literally didn't cheat until then. I did try to reintroduce early on because I was like, I'm only going to do this for 6 weeks and then I'm going to try like olives or something. And the reactions were so bad that I just stopped. In 2020, I tried to start eating fruit again, like berries, like things people should be able to eat. And it wasn't terrible, but I got sicker over a period of like 2 or 3 weeks. So I cut those out again. And then recently I had a baby. I had a baby 4 months ago. I had a meat aversion the entire pregnancy, which can happen if you're pregnant, where like meat makes you, it doesn't taste good and kind of makes you nauseous.
It's like the opposite of a craving.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's no way this is going to happen to me because all I eat is meat. And I had it the entire pregnancy. And it was horrible. I know it's funny, but it's like...
So I heard that's your body telling you that you need certain nutrients, and that's what the cravings are for. Like if people are craving ice cream, it's like your body's craving whatever that is for the child.
I don't think so. Because people get cravings like ice cream, and you don't need ice cream for the baby. And most pregnant women gain like massive amounts of weight during pregnancy, which isn't healthy either, because then you give birth to babies that weigh too much. In the 90s, they used to say if you have cravings, eat that. That's what your body needs. But they don't say that anymore. They're like, eat a healthy diet. They don't say eat only meat. That would just horrify most doctors, like horrify. I didn't have an obstetrician. I had a midwife. And she was chill.
Why do you think the diet is so controversial? Because I was doing research. I saw a Harvard study that said people in the study who ate the most red meat tended to die younger and die more often from cardiovascular disease and cancer. Others seem to think there's no problem with it at all. So why is it such a controversial thing?
Well, there were a bunch of studies that came out like decades ago showing that red meat was bad and saturated fat was bad. And like I said, those were all epidemiological studies where they look at like large groups of people and they kind of hand out a piece of paper you can fill out saying what your diet is. And most people who eat red meat eat them with other things. A lot of it's processed. So I eat red meat 3 times a day. I'm going to McDonald's and I'm having burgers and fries and a milkshake. And then they go, okay, it's the burger. It's like, it's not the burger. It's the bun and the fries and the milkshake. So most of the studies on meat are done from that. And then they've also recently decided saturated fat isn't a problem. But that's new research in the last like 5 years.
But then how much are you going to trust the new research? It seems like the research is always changing. And the research that everyone understood to be fact 20 years ago, everyone's like, well, I actually don't really know about that.
There was also influence from different like food corporations in America, if you want to get conspiratorial.
Okay.
So there was like the seed oils. They're like, stop eating butter. It's not good for you. You should eat canola oil. And that was all not true. That was to sell canola oil. Or there was sugar. Sugar was like a weight loss drug in the 50s. Sugar's not a weight loss drug. Yeah, like eat sugar. It'll satisfy your sweet tooth. There are ads from the 50s that show sugar for weight loss.
I think milk was similar.
Yeah.
The whole milk industry.
Cigarettes they're like cigarettes, for diet suppression and stuff in the 50s. Part of the reason I don't delve into the science is because, one, I don't really care because of how I feel. And 2, because most scientific studies, period, have some sort of agenda behind them and you can't trust who makes them. Yeah. Or they're just not, they're done sloppily like the epidemiological studies on meat.
How many problems in life do you think are diet related?
It depends. If you're depressed, like most of your problems then are probably diet related. Because if you're depressed, then that changes your outlook on life and it can impact your work and your relationships. Like being severely depressed and having a relationship is very difficult because you misinterpret what the other person's saying. You're like a little bit paranoid. You're hurt really easily. You're volatile. Like that impacts your relationships massively. So I say anybody suffering from any type of chronic illness should try and figure it out themselves and look into diet. And at minimum, remove the processed foods and do something like you're doing, because that's usually enough to be like, oh, I lost weight. Like when I did that, I was probably more restrictive than you, but it was pretty much like Whole Foods. I went down 3 pant sizes in a month, but I only lost 5 pounds. And so a lot of my, I was bloated and I didn't even know it. That went down. And I was just like, diet can have that kind of impact, because I'd always thought that exercise makes you lose weight. So I was at the gym all the time trying to get abs. And then I went on a diet and I had abs. I was like, oh, I thought it didn't matter what you ate as long as you didn't eat too much. But that wasn't the case for me. That's like what people used to say. They're still kind of saying it now.
It is interesting. I feel like whenever you go to the doctors with a certain problem, like the last thing that's ever discussed is diet.
Yeah.
And I feel like intuitively, not a nutritionist, intuitively, it makes the most sense. It's like the oil that you're putting in your ar, essentially. It's like you want to put in the good stuff to make sure it runs efficiently.
Doctors don't get very much nutrition education in med school. And what they are taught is taught from the government, basically, which is like the food pyramid, which has been created by these companies that were trying to push seed oils and wheat.
That's what I was taught, is the whole food pyramid as a kid.
I was taught.
That's what I was taught too.
Yeah.
I mean, I had bread at every meal. I used to have, did you guys have sugar and cinnamon on toast? I used to have sugar and cinnamon on toast.
No, but I would have plenty of sugar.
It's
Like
really-
Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Like I grew up thinking like,
cinnamon
I'm
toast.
having my
I know.
breakfast. I'm getting my
Part of a
dairy.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I'm getting
balanced
my
breakfast.
dairy. I know.
You know
Just-
what? I remember begging my mom for Reese's Puffs.
Ugh.
Remember those Reese's Puff cereal?
Yeah.
And I thought it was so cool because the commercials made it seem like these kids are like the cool
Hip-hop
kids.
song.
Yeah.
Reese's Puffs. Reese's Puffs.
The kids who ate Reese's Puffs, I thought they were like the coolest people. And I was like, it's part of a well-balanced breakfast. Like they say it in the commercial.
Yeah.
And so, but looking back, it's a dessert. Like
Yeah.
there's no way that's healthy
seems
for a
obvious
child to eat. Even Lunchables
Yeah.
had a thing recently where I think it was like 70 or 80% of like your entire day's sodium were in one little tiny meal for Lunchables. Or Capri Sun, which is loaded with sugar, but I'd see those Silver Surfers that would go and like turn into the silver blob of liquid and like go through walls and
Oh,
stuff
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
I thought that
Mhm.
was so cool. So I'm like, I gotta have a Capri Sun.
Do you have Dunkaroos or is that a Canadian thing?
No, I
never heard of
haven't.
that.
Yeah.
Dunkaroos
It's like this
are great.
chocolate like graham cracker thing that you would
He's like
dip.
Canadian, so it's
But there's no way that's healthy.
There's healthy options now, though. Like my kid isn't on, obviously, and she's not on the diet I'm on, but she eats more like a paleo diet, so like not processed foods
Sure.
and things.
Mhm.
And the little snacks you can get now, you can get healthy snacks. So people who aren't looking into this, it's silly. You can still go the Dunkaroo. I don't know if they make Dunkaroos anymore. They were good, but like you can still go that route. But it's like, why do that when you have the healthy version that still comes in a little snack box? Like it's made with real fruit. It doesn't have added sugars, stuff like that. There's options now.
So why do you think people gravitate towards the unhealthy foods?
They're super addictive. Try getting off of them. Literally try cutting out sugar. You know, there's studies showing like sugar versus cocaine in rats, and rats will take the sugar over the cocaine. And people are like, that's an insane thing to say. It can't be more addictive than cocaine. Try getting off of sugar. Seriously getting off of it. The cravings are crazy. Like when I cut out processed foods, I was having dreams about angel food cake. Like dreams about it. Dreams about brownies. It was really hard. And I have experience getting off of things because with the hip and ankle replacement, I was put on OxyContin for a year, which like saved me because I was like suicidal with pain. It was insane. And the Canadian healthcare system is so bad that it took a really long time to get the surgeries. But I had to get off of OxyContin, and getting off of OxyContin was easier than cutting out sugar. Cutting out dairy was really hard too.
And what's
Cheese
the
is
reason
good.
for that? Is it purely cravings or is it because sugar is in everything?
No, it's cravings. It's definitely cravings.
Yeah. And I've noticed like in my own personal life, if I've been buying these like chocolate milk cartons, Fairlife, which are like macros, pretty
Oh
decent.
my gosh.
If you know, you know. So I'll drink one day and the next day, come around like 5 p.m., same time the day before I was drinking it, I'll be like, I kind of need some like sugar in my system right now.
Yeah.
And I go right back to it.
Yeah,
The same thing goes like you have ice cream one day, you want it so much more the
Yeah.
next day than you did some random day.
it's hard. You can switch these things out too. But even so, at the beginning when I was on more of a paleo diet, I'd be like, I cut out dairy because dairy can be hard for people with autoimmune disorders. It was really bad for my arthritis. And I switched over to like coconut ice cream. And there are a lot of different coconut ice cream products. And they taste good, but they don't give you the high that you're looking for.
Mhm.
And so you still get the cravings and everything. Dairy causes insane cravings too. It was dairy and soy and sugar that were the hardest to get off of.
Do you ever crave steak nowadays?
Not really. I get like hungry and then it's steak. So it tastes amazing.
So steak still tastes good.
Yeah. But for that first initial period of getting onto the diet, you get it doesn't taste so
You know what's
good.
Oh, you know what's interesting? It reminds me of I did the Starbucks diet. And this is for a video.
Oh no.
And it was only Starbucks for 1 week straight. Day 1 was fine. Day 2, I slept in. And I never sleep in. I
Yeah.
slept in day 2. And I posted a video late, which again, I never post late. Day 3 came around. I started to physically feel sick. I wanted to start throwing up because I felt so bad. Like even the idea of eating a Starbucks anything was just bad. And then Jack said, it can't be that bad. And I said, let's try it too. See if you just make it the next 4 days. And Jack did it. How did you feel on like day 3?
It was the same. So like day 1, it's exciting because like obviously Starbucks sandwiches, like they just taste good. But then it's weird. Like I didn't want to be like a wimp and complain about it because I try not to complain about things. But like day 2 and 3, I felt like dizzy a little bit nauseous, like weirdly not hungry. You know, and I felt like I was like kind of forcing myself to eat for lunch when I usually have a massive appetite. So it was weird. And then after a while, I will say near the tail end of it, it wasn't so bad. I kind of get used to it. I feel like it's the same thing in that Super Size Me documentary.
Oh, that was brutal.
Apparently a lot of that was fabricated.
Oh.
Yeah, he had
Just
longstanding.
like everything else.
It was a longstanding alcohol addiction, I think, before then and partly during. that might have
Oh.
skewed some of the results. So when the doctors were saying, oh, this looks like a person who has been drinking for decades,
Oh, he had.
conveniently left
Yeah.
that out.
Conveniently.
Yeah, so, not to discredit, I'm sure some of it's valid, but I'm
Mhm.
sure there's also some nuance to that wasn't discussed in the movie.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't know that.
Makes for a great story, though.
That was a good documentary. Yeah, I forgot about that. One of the things that happens when you change your diet dramatically in any direction is your microbiome has to adapt. So that's like all the gut bacteria in your gut. And they survive off of your like normal diet, and they can produce cravings. So if you cut out a bunch of food, which you guys would have had to cut out certain groups of food when you're only eating Starbucks food, it's giving you cravings for those foods. And it takes a while for those microbes to die off, and then the cravings go away.
Although really quick before we go into that, if you run your own online business, there's no better sound than hearing. And if you want to hear a lot more, then our sponsor Shopify is there to help. For those unaware, Shopify is the global e-commerce platform that's already helped transform millions of businesses worldwide.
For example, Shopify has an endless list of integrations, third-party apps, and flexible templates to help customize your online store exactly the way you want to.
And honestly, what really sets Shopify apart from their competitors is their ability to turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout that's 36% better on average than other leading e-commerce platforms.
And fun fact, Shopify actually powers 10% of all e-commerce in the United States, supporting brands like Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen in over 175 countries.
In fact, if you didn't know, my coffee company, BankrollCoffee.com, is run exclusively through Shopify, and when we were first setting up the website, there was no one else I wanted to work with other than Shopify because they're just that good.
So guys, you can literally change your life with just $1 when you sign up for Shopify's $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ICH, all lowercase.
Again, that's shopify.com/ICH, shopify.com/ICH with the link down below in the description. Thank you so much, and now let's get back to the episode. So what do you think is the ideal diet for the average person?
I would cut out all processed foods, and I would question dairy, because that can give people like fatigue and brain fog and skin problems. I'd question dairy. For like the healthy person without an autoimmune disorder or something, I would go on like a paleo diet and cut out all the processed foods.
Yeah, I think processed foods are like the one that I can say fairly confidently are just bad.
Yeah. And I would also like skew heavily toward meat. So I'd eat meat at every meal, include all the other whole foods that people are meant to eat. Like, I think the only reason that I'm stuck on this diet is because I was so damaged from like a number of different things. My house, when I grew up, when I got really sick, had black mold in the basement again, which I think contributed to a lot of the autoimmune problems. And then I was on antibiotics a lot as a kid, and I was like born through a C-section, which can mess up your microbiome. Like, I think there were a lot of contributing factors, which is why I'm like allergic to everything. But if you're a healthy person already, I'd look up Max Lugavere. He has a book. He talks about mostly cutting out processed foods, lowering or eliminating grains, and eating, healthy meat.
How do you prepare your steaks?
I use an air fryer most of the time. So I eat New York strip and cook it from frozen, covered in salt
You cook
in
it
an
from
air fryer.
frozen?
That's the air fryer hack. Do you guys have an air fryer?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So you've got.
But you
that
get a
far.
good
That's
crust
good.
on it?
You get a better
flip
crust
it?
because it doesn't cook all the way through. Yeah, flip it. You do, if it's like this thick, you cook it for like 9 minutes per side. Yeah, and it gets crusty on the
And
outside.
what cut is it?
New York.
Okay, I'll give it a shot.
It'll change your life. You just take it out of the freezer, put it in frozen. It's wet. You don't have to thaw it. If you thaw it, it overcooks in the middle.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I've never heard of that before.
It'll change your life.
Now, what
It's
about
such a
yeah.
hack too. Even if you don't want to be healthier,
Sounds
it's
easy.
so much easier.
Yeah.
Now, what about doing the opposite and going vegan? What are your thoughts on veganism?
I don't think veganism is sustainable long term at all. I think it causes muscle loss and I don't think that you can add in different supplements to get everything you could be getting from meat. So I'm not a fan of veganism. I've seen a lot of people who are vegan, and those are people who are open enough to try crazy diets too. Like, because if you go on vegan, it's very restrictive. And so a lot of those people will be like, well, it's not working. And they'll hop on this like lion diet, which is also crazy. So there's a lot of like crossover from vegans. I think initially people can feel better because they're removing dairy, which is causing a problem for them, and a lot of processed foods. So if you're just eating more whole foods, you're going to feel better. If you go the vegan route where you're just eating processed vegan foods, I think that's like the worst thing you could do.
Now, I'm curious, going into that, you did a TEDx talk and they decided not to post it.
Yeah.
What happened on that? Did they communicate to you ahead of time? And why did they decide not to show your speech?
They said it violated community guidelines, but they wouldn't tell me which guidelines it violated. And I was really careful when I was organizing that. And it was just to talk about, this is what happened to me. it would be great if we could get some studies out of this, because there's literally thousands of people on this diet who have gone from serious, like bedridden autoimmunity or psychiatric illnesses to asymptomatic. That is impossible. Do some studies. That's what I said in the speech, and they just didn't put it up. But TEDx has been completely, and TED has been completely infiltrated with like political and vegan propaganda, if you look at what they're posting and what they're not posting.
So you think they had an agenda, and they were pushed from one side to say, hey, we can't publish this. This is bad for our look. This goes against what we kind of...
But what was the agenda? Like, are they just anti-meat eating or something?
I don't even know, like, who controls these, or I have no idea. But if you go to TEDx or TED and you look at the videos that pop up, there's a whole bunch of vegan videos. There aren't any like meat is healthy videos, which is coming back. Like, it's not just me saying this. The studies are reversing. If you want to trust the studies, there's studies coming. I know Harvard wrote that thing that was like anti-meat, but there's a doctor at Harvard, Chris Palmer, that's saying a ketogenic diet is how you treat like schizophrenia and bipolar and severe mental illness. So there are studies being done now on ketogenic diets, which is like, it's close enough, basically. I don't know who decides these things.
How often is the media trying to silence what you have to say?
I have no idea. Like, it's hard to tell. A couple of months ago, views went down on my dad's channel, like dramatically, like 80% fewer. And on my channel, we think what had happened, because we got somebody who used to work at YouTube to look into it, that AI had picked up certain keywords and just auto-suppressed it, which happens on YouTube all the time. It's not like a person being like, no, it's AI picking up keywords and saying no. And so that kind of thing happens. In 2018, there were a bunch of negative articles about me being like, oh, she only eats meat. And doctors being like, well, this isn't going to last very long. And now that it's been 6.5 years and I'm fine, there are far fewer articles being like, well, she's about to die. It's like, oh, okay, she hasn't. So it's not that interesting anymore.
Why is it that people think that you and your dad are so controversial?
I think they thought dad was paranoid at the beginning because this Bill C-16 thing, he was like, you're going to misgender someone and they'll throw you in prison. And everyone was like, you're crazy. And then that started happening like 4 years later.
So that actually happened?
I'm not sure if it happened in Canada. I know it happened in Scotland or Ireland where somebody misgendered someone and they ended up in prison.
What was the sentence like?
I don't know. I'd have to look into it. But it was prison for misgendering. Like, it was on purpose. It wasn't an accident.
It was like setting.
It was like refusing to use
okay.
pronouns more than anything else. And he was saying, well, people are going to be ridiculous with their pronouns, and then they're going to require you use them, and you can't change English like that. And people were like, well, he's overreacting. And even at the time, I was like, I'm still behind what he's saying, but it might be he's like really worked up about this, and maybe it's an overreaction. And then lo and behold, like 3 or 4 years later, there's all this crazy trans stuff. I didn't think it would get to like where it's at now. So I can understand why that was controversial. And then to throw that on top, there was like, oh, the meat diet, only eating meat. And then it's obvious why that was controversial, because nobody knew you could do that. And 2, we've been saying, hey, it seems to put, chronic illness into remission, which is a crazy thing to put with only eating meat. I think it's less controversial now that it's been a period of time. And I think there are more people saying what dad's been saying. There's like fewer articles coming out.
Maybe it's not less controversial, but there are more controversial things to talk about. So like it's the same level, but it's now like the controversy's gone like up here.
That's actually probably it. People are like, this is crazy. And then COVID hit and shut down the entire world. And they're like, oh, this is crazy. Yeah, that's probably
that's
right.
That's what I feel like is going on.
Yeah,
like deep down, it's just purely that. So how does all that controversy change the dynamic with your family?
All we were talking about was like political stuff and controversy and like bad things, and it was really depressing. And it took about 5 years for us to be like, oh wait, no, maybe when a negative article comes out, people don't trust it and actually agree with you, and that helps. So then we kind of like changed our perspective on, oh, negative articles are actually maybe positive. Like there's no, bad publicity,
no bad press.
Right.
Which it turns out is true.
It's interesting for me to hear that because like kind of as an outsider to that, where I see some of the articles, but I don't give them much attention. I would just think for you and your entire family that it wouldn't even bother you. From my perspective, it's like, oh yeah, it's another one of those. It keeps scrolling. Like it wouldn't even affect them. But to hear that it like does have an effect is I mean, it makes sense, but
You don't
for me,
think about that.
right.
I know. I'd also seen like tabloids on celebrities where it's like, oh, so and so is now like hooking up with this other person, or they're getting a divorce and things. And I'd heard celebrities be like, that's stressful. But you look at it and you're just like, well, nobody believes that. You don't get it until it happens to you, and then you think it affects your livelihood or your friends or something, and then it's really stressful. It's like stressful to have the spotlight put on you in a negative way like that, and probably in a positive way too. I mean, you see like kid celebrities grow up and get entirely screwed up, even though they're not necessarily controversial. So I think it's been a crazy experience, because I went from being like normal university kid, going out and drinking. I had lots of friends. I was like doing fairly well until I couldn't get to class, and then I was not doing well. But I went from being totally normal, not having very much money at all, to understanding what it's like to like have money and have a level of notoriety. And it's definitely changes your perspective. It's weird.
How much out there does the mainstream media get wrong about you or about your family?
I mean, everything from 2021 on backwards. So like 2017 to 2021, like none of that was true. The worst one was the Sunday Times in the UK. And it was after my dad was extremely ill. My family was like distraught, and we were trying to explain why he'd been gone. And I was like paranoid enough about it that I recorded the audio of the interview. And that was like massive hit piece. They called me, the woman called me a pouting Barbie, and basically wrote in that I was controlling and manipulating my dad. Oh, and that he had schizophrenia, which he like didn't and never has. It was really bad. Fortunately, it was so negative that the comments were like, this is ridiculous. But it was really upsetting, because it was after like a period where my mom was extremely ill, my dad was extremely ill, and we were just starting to be like, okay, mate, let's try to get like life back up again. And then it was like, wham, hit piece from the Sunday Times. I was like, this is really upsetting.
I feel like people don't even read that stuff anymore, though, to be completely honest.
Somebody does.
But
Somebody
sure,
reads
somebody does, but I feel like most people are like on Twitter or maybe like the mainstream media. But I feel like that's also starting to decline.
This was 2021. It had already declined by then. It's declined way more by now. I feel like in 2018, though, when negative articles were coming up, people were still reading them. But now, since podcasting kind of took over and Twitter and social media, yeah, they're dead. That's why they all charge like $1 to read these articles, and nobody pays them. I was like, how many people are actually reading your articles if you charge them $1? Nobody.
It's funny, every website that I used to read for free and read all the time, every single one of them is like, do our trial now for only $1 for the next. But
I know,
it makes me not want to pay for it.
I know. And it's because they need money, because they're dying, because nobody's reading their content.
What's the one that's loaded with ads? I think it's like Daily Mail. It's like one of those
bad
things, but there's like ads that are on top of ads.
Yeah.
Like there's an ad, but then there's a pop-up on top of the ad.
We got to figure out how we can do that on the podcast. We can use that as a monetization strategy.
YouTube got rid of the banner ads. I think pop-up blockers or something were getting too good, and I think it distracted
those
people
were
from the video.
annoying.
Yeah.
I got YouTube Premium as soon as they put ads on, though.
Yeah.
The best money I've ever spent.
YouTube Premium is amazing.
But yeah, it's gotten really bad. So I could see those going out of business. I don't know who keeps them going.
They are. I mean, a lot of them have like some billionaire behind them. I'm not even joking. I know that. So some of them are getting donations, but we have like a couple of friendlier news sources, and I've asked them for their numbers when Dad will write a guest blog or something like that. And I've asked for their numbers, and even their numbers compared to what you get on social media, it's like nothing. And these are huge names. So I don't think they're going to last. They have to seriously pivot. I don't even know how they could pivot, to tell you the truth.
So why do the billionaires support these media publications? Like, what is the incentive for them?
They
try to
control the narrative.
Yeah, but who's reading them? I mean, if they have billions of dollars, it must be pretty smart. They'd be like, okay, well, apparently if I like buy out a Twitter account instead of like, Daily Loud or whatever you said, like,
Daily Mail.
Daily Mail.
Daily Loud.
So many. They're all the same. I don't know. Like if they buy out that, it's just not going to get the same ROI as like,
I think
being
it's
in
old. It's old. It's like purchase these media companies in the 90s, and then they still have them.
That,
I don't think like
credibility or something.
Yeah, and then they've just lost it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that would be the new way of controlling the narrative.
Yeah, I think our version is going to be, let's like buy a social media account. Let's buy a YouTube channel, and then we can make videos or pay people to make videos on certain topics.
Yeah,
that drown
it would be
out.
that. Put money behind some sort of message and encourage like smaller influencers to make videos on certain topics and just disseminate it everywhere.
So part of me, I wonder how common that is, because some of the videos, I'm just curious. If you paid certain channels, be like, hey, make a video on this, make a video on this, you could easily, with a good video, shift the narrative.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh,
I'm curious how common that is, or if it's happening right now and to what degree.
I mean, I'm so far into conspiratory land that
Oh, I'd love to go into that.
it's not even funny. Like, since I can survive only eating meat and all my health problems are gone, nothing is real.
So what are some of your beliefs when it comes to conspiracy theories?
I 100% believe that there's money behind certain messaging that's put out.
Like what?
Like messaging on Twitter. Like, Israeli-Palestine war came out. I think that one side is probably being funded. And I think there's funding behind universities now teaching students certain ways of thinking, because universities have gone crazy.
But let's start with the university. What's the purpose behind that, and why would someone want to fund a certain agenda? Like, what's in it for them?
I think most billionaires get into this and think that they're doing something good for the world. Like, even the fight against meat, like, meat is bad, eat these meat alternatives. Like, I don't think that came from an evil place. Nobody evil thinks they're doing evil. Like, it comes from like, I'm a billionaire. I've worked my entire life to amass this amount of money. I want to help the world for good. This is what I believe is good, and I'll pay people to make it happen. And it's just like a mistake.
Yeah.
But it sounds like kind of like an ego thing too, to think that you know what is right for everyone else.
Oh, that's for sure. But I mean, I guess when you get to the point of having billions of dollars, you're such a small percentage of the population that you're like, one part of you's got to be like, I am more talented and I am smarter and I am better. And these plebs can't think for themselves. Obviously, look at society.
I could see that. I mean, think of Dave Ramsey's approach of anti-credit card. If he were worth $10 billion, imagine him sinking $1 billion of that into anti-credit card. But because it's worked for him,
like,
and it's worked for his people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if he's trying to help people, that could be a way that he would do that.
Yeah.
I remember also, I was approached by a diamond company. It was I don't remember the specific name, but they worked in the diamond industry, and they wanted me to make a video about how natural diamonds are actually better for the environment and they're better for the consumer than lab grown. And they were offering a pretty crazy amount of money for me to make one video talking about natural diamonds as investments. I said no, because but it sent me down this weird rabbit hole of looking up lab-grown diamonds versus natural diamonds and both the arguments. I didn't realize that there was so much that went into lab-grown diamonds in terms of marketing, of how they're cheaper and how they aren't involved in the slave trade, and they're not blood diamonds. And the more I got into it, the more I realized that a lot of what they said is outdated, and that just the natural diamonds are now, there's a lot of them that are sourced in such a way that are very ethical and that help support these communities. But the lab grown diamond, that whole side wants you to believe that natural diamonds are bad, and like all, but they're both sides are really just like throwing their arguments at the media of like, one doesn't hold their value, one's bad for the environment, one takes advantage of people, one doesn't. It's very interesting, but it's all just like two industries throwing money at each other to try to like one up each other.
Was that the sneaky diamond ad?
No,
that
no.
just, like, slowly injected
You didn't end
there?
up working with them.
No, I couldn't do it. I
Yeah,
couldn't do it
it's
because
a good idea not to.
Well, my thing is that, like, just from my perspective, I'm known as like the frugal person, and just I know myself. If I saw a lab-grown diamond and a natural diamond, I'd go with lab-grown purely because of the cost, and I'd probably buy that lab-grown diamond pre-owned. So I can't get behind a message of like, you know, getting a natural diamond, even though it holds its value, when I look at the same thing for a tenth of the cost. So just like from a principle standpoint, I couldn't even do that. But there's like, no amount of money that would make me, and plus people would know. They'd be like, Graham, come on, a natural diamond, you get a lab grown.
Well, it gets worse than that too. Like, if we want to delve into diamonds, it turns out just the fact that diamonds are valuable is questionable. I don't know if you guys knew about that, but from a stone perspective and how rare they are, they're not one of the rarer stones. So the whole diamond industry, I think it was made up in the 30s, and it was like diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Yes.
That was a huge marketing thing that came out. So the entire diamond industry, regardless of natural versus
it's the same with the 3-month salary.
It's
that purely
was
marketing.
Yeah.
I forget what the company was. It starts with a D.
What is it? 3 months.
Was it De Beers or something?
De Beers.
Yeah.
That was it. They came out with this marketing ploy that said that the diamond ring that you propose with should be equivalent to 3 months of your salary. There's nothing else behind it other than a marketing campaign to get you to spend more money on the diamond. And if you didn't spend that 3 months, she must not be worth it. You must not love her.
Was that based off of like research and data or something? Like
no,
happiest of
data.
marriages are based off
3 months salary.
You know,
no, it was purely a marketing thing. And now when I hear anyone say like, "Oh, I'm going to get this diamond ring, 3 months salary," I just like, you fell into a marketing ploy. It's like, can you not think for yourself? It's true. Is it not? Can they not think outside the box and think for themselves and do something different?
I think that's super fair. A lot of people, though, you can't deny that they are affected by their environment. And you can't ask everybody to be hyper cognizant of every single decision.
I think they should question it. I think they should
I agree.
Think, why am I doing this? Where did I come up with this belief? Where is this expectation set?
Mm-hmm.
When you look into a lot of these things, it makes no sense. What are some of the other conspiracies that you have? Or other beliefs that maybe people aren't talking enough about?
I don't think they're conspiracy theories because I think they're true, but I don't have any like faith in the government as a body that can like organize people properly. And I think most people have seen that since COVID. Like that wasn't handled properly. And I don't think the medical system knows what they're doing in terms of chronic illness. If you want to go get a broken arm fixed, go to the hospital. Did you know the third leading cause of death is medical error? Did you know that?
No idea.
That's the third leading cause of death is medical error. Nobody talks about that. It's dangerous. Doctors are dangerous. That's what I think. Unless you're going to a surgeon. That's different. So I guess that's a conspiracy theory, but the data supports it.
Why do you think that's so high? I mean, my thinking is that human bodies are very complex. Every person is going to be slightly different. And a doctor could only do so much to save people. Like that's what I would like to believe, at least.
I don't think so. I think the pharmaceutical industry's got involved in medical care. So a lot of the courses or lectures that are done to doctors are taught by pharmaceutical representatives. So, you have depression, and then you get like told or paid to give out certain antidepressants to treat depression. And then you're not taught about nutrition, and what you are taught is taught by the government, who's taught by this food pyramid that was made by companies trying to sell their products. Like the entire thing is just a lie. So why is medical error the third leading cause of death? Because they're using pharmaceuticals to treat diseases that can't be treated with pharmaceuticals.
But it's like a bandage is what you're saying. And then they're financially incentivized to keep
it. It's like a bad bandage. Like even when I was on Enbrel and methotrexate. Those were the like drug names for arthritis. And initially when I went on them, they like worked. So I had arthritis in like 30-ish joints. It was everywhere except for my spine. It was in my like jaw. It was everywhere. And it worked initially. And I went from being like basically wheelchair bound to running around like a little kid when I was in grade 3. By the time I was 17, I needed my hip and ankle replaced. So it didn't stop the progression of the arthritis, but it like masked the symptoms for a while. That's what these medications can do. Antidepressants. Getting off of antidepressants was way harder than getting off of OxyContin. That's like new. People don't know about antidepressant withdrawal. Psych med withdrawal is horrible. It's horrible.
How?
It exacerbates your psychiatric symptoms. That's what it feels like. So when I got off of it, I was like, I felt like I could feel my depression lift when I was on the antidepressants, because you still feel the depression on the antidepressants. It's just like masked by this kind of like heavy fatigue, warm, cuddly feeling. But it like underneath, you can feel the like pain of depression. And I got off of that, and I had 2 years of antidepressant withdrawal, which was like one of the worst experiences of my life, with just insomnia, like crawling feelings all over my body. I had no idea that antidepressants caused withdrawal. No idea. I knew that if you were on painkillers for a while, like with the hip and ankle replacement, that causes withdrawal. But I didn't know these other medications cause withdrawal. So I don't have any faith in the medical system anymore. Most doctors don't know they cause withdrawal. And most people, they'll go into withdrawal when they stop taking them. The doctor will say, that's your psychiatric illness. And then they'll go back on them. So this is coming out now too, but like the medical system probably needs 10 or 15 years to catch up with like diet and which new medications cause withdrawal, things like that.
Have you noticed there be any studies about like withdrawal from Adderall?
I haven't read studies. I know a lot of people who've gone the diet route and gotten off of Adderall. So this is just like anecdotal. I haven't read studies, and it seems like you get more tired and your like thoughts can be more scattered, and it's mostly fatigue. It doesn't seem like psychiatric medications where it can cause things like akathisia or just like being uncomfortable in your own skin or having lights hurt you or noises hurt you. Like that's what antidepressant withdrawal do. And with painkillers, it's more like a really, really, really severe hangover. Like if you drank way too much, you get like, you sweat, you get nauseous, your pain receptors can be heightened, so you feel like you're in pain. That's kind of what like opiate withdrawal is like. I don't know about Adderall. Adderall seems to have less withdrawal, but I've heard about Adderall withdrawal too. Any medication you take daily, your brain kind of adjusts to it, and if you pull it out suddenly, your brain has to shift back. And you should be taught that before you take a medication every day.
So are doctors financially incentivized?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Do they get paid more if they recommend? Because I don't know exactly how the pharmaceutical industry works. I know that you have these reps that go in, and the reps are paid by like if they could get this doctor to prescribe this medication, but does the doctor get a kickback?
Yeah,
like
doctors are paid as well.
How is that allowed? If I recommend this one medication over another, like I'll make more money with this.
The regulations in America are crazy. Like compared to Europe, for example, where you're not allowed to do that. Like there are places, most places that's banned, but not in America. In America too, you can have ads on television for drugs. Like you're not allowed to do that in Canada. Or you can have billboards for drugs and things. That's not legal in most countries.
Yeah. What was the commercial I used to see a lot as a kid? I think it was a Zoloft, right? With the little
and that's
bubble thing, and it was looking so cute. And then it's
extremely
like,
impossible to get off of. It's extremely hard to get off of.
So what do you think is the difference then between depression and someone who's just really, really sad? And how can you tell which one you are and like treat them appropriately?
I think it would be tricky to tell, but it depends on the level of depression. Like I think most of America has some level of anxiety that I think could be alleviated if they were eating healthier. But if you're going through something like a divorce or your relationship is screwed up or one of your family members died or even your dog died or something like that and you're feeling sad, then you have to attribute that to what's going on. If your life is pretty good and you don't have any reason to feel sad, that's probably depression. So I remember my dad said he'd be in therapy and someone would come in and they'd be depressed and he'd be like, well, how many friends do you have? Like, do you see them frequently? Are you in a relationship? How's your work? Like he'd check off aspects of their life. And if everything was going well and they still felt like this, then it was probably depression.
How often is it, though, just to have an off day? Because there's some days where objectively I could look and say everything is fantastic, but I just wake up that morning, I'm just not feeling myself. I just don't feel like doing anything. It's just an off day. And
I think that that's pretty normal. I don't have very many off days where my mood is hit dramatically, where I'm like, this is an off day on this diet. But I mean, I still have off days. So that's normal. It's like depression is when every day is difficult, even if it shouldn't be difficult. And everything is hard. And, it feels like you're walking through molasses. Like, or you go into a social situation and you're thinking about what you're going to say. You're not able to communicate with people and you're awkward. Like you can get to a serious level of mental illness.
Yeah. So for someone just feeling sad, like going through the checklist of like diet, exercise, friends, what do you think is the easiest thing for people to begin to solve?
I would start with diet and I would cut out grains and processed food and then see how you feel. That's like the easiest step. And even if you're doing that, you like replace them with other foods you like. So look up like paleo alternative to pizza and eat that instead of the normal pizza you're eating. Like I've got on my Amazon, I have a list of like healthy swaps for lazy people, which just like instead of eating like complete garbage, eat the healthy version of that garbage. It's still not the greatest health food, but at least you're cutting out some of the like toxic stuff that Americans are eating now. People can start pretty slow. And if you're really depressed, people kind of need to start slow. Like being like, only eat meat. And they're like, I can't even get out of bed. Like,
there's an example of that. It's a bit processed, but there's, instead of eating like potato chips, they had these like chicken chips. And it's chicken meat. And it tastes the same. It's a weird mental thing to like eat a chip and know you're eating chicken, but it tastes the same.
It's those things.
Yeah.
There's also like, there's sweet potato chips now that are cooked with like olive oil or avocado oil. You could like swap to that. It's not quite as like satiating. The chicken things, I've had like beef chips because there's a bunch of products now that are just like beef and salt in bags. There's like jerky, I love jerky. Everybody likes jerky. Only crazy people don't like jerky. But you like eat that kind of thing as a snack instead.
Yeah. What do you think we're going to look back on in 100 years and say, I can't believe we did that.
Can I talk about the trans stuff?
Sure, it could be
Go
anything.
ahead.
You want that on YouTube?
Yeah.
That's what I think we're going to look back on and be like, that's crazy. And I mean, like, putting kids on hormones or doing surgery that makes them like infertile as a teenager. I think that's what we're going to look back on in 100 years for sure. Britain's reversed it. Germany's gone like full steam ahead, encouraging it. Certain states in America have backed off. So I think it's already reversing, but we'll definitely look back in time over the last like 3 years-ish and be like, oh, wow, they were doing what to children?
And what do you think it's going to take for that to be like a more normal dialogue? Like people need to like, transition as like a younger person and maybe like they get older and they don't like that decision.
Yeah, unfortunately,
that's where
I
it's
feel
gonna-
like a lot of people are going to have to get hurt and then they're going to have to come out and say, hey, this was, I was really depressed. I was confused when I was 14. I went to a psychiatrist. They suggested this. I thought that was a good idea. And now I'm stuck with this forever. I think that's going to have to happen to more people, unfortunately.
And what about those who do it as an adult? Like they live their entire life feeling a little bit, out of their body or whatever. And they're like, okay, I'd like to make a change. This is kind of how I felt.
That's what I've been thinking too.
Thinking about for yourself?
No,
Oh.
no, but just the people in general
That's what I got as well.
That's what I've been thinking about, Jack. That's it. No, but for the people who have gone their entire lives thinking that like I am born in the wrong body and I do not feel like I am my gender and I felt this way since a kid. I'm, you could say I'm 25, you're an adult, you're fully developed. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time. And I want to be who I feel like I am on the, in my mind.
My perspective is something's wrong with your head, bluntly, but I also don't care. So like if I also don't know what that feels like. So if they're going to do that and they're 25, then like that's their choice. I think doing it to a kid is insane. Like you guys remember when you're like 13 or 14, you can't even see straight. Like I couldn't even use my brain properly till I was like 22 probably. Like it took a while. And as a teenager, you're going through all these fluctuations, like you're going through puberty, it's uncomfortable. Like doing that to kids before they can think is a completely different story than like consenting adults. I still think messaging and propaganda can impact adults, obviously, but I'm more concerned about like pre-18.
I agree. I think there is a difference when you're a kid versus like when you're making a
Or like
fully
3 or
intentional
4
decision.
year olds, that's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even remember anything from when I was like 3
I
years old.
know. Yeah,
So-
neither do I.
My thing 100 years from now is shorts and TikToks, is attention span.
Do you think it's going to go back to long form or do you think it's going to get shorter?
I think
Everything's
so.
going to be in like VR though, or AR.
Mhm.
In 100 years, like we have no idea. Probably AR for everything.
To me, it just seems like such a strong dopamine hit, especially if you're growing up as a child.
Do you think they'll ever regulate it? Like I know in Florida, they just passed a bill that you have to be 16. I think it's before you can have social media accounts in Florida.
Probably smart.
Yeah, which I think makes sense. I don't know.
But if
Yeah.
it's a little checkbox, it's like, oh yeah, I'm 16.
I know.
Check.
You just put
'Cause
in an
Facebook,
older
I think
age.
Facebook, I think has always been like 13. But you could just say, oh, I'm, whatever age,
No,
I'm
that's
13,
true.
that's fine. So I don't know. I think it's really got to be on the parents. But I can't imagine what it would do to your attention span and the way you function to not have TikTok. Like that's what you grew up to. It's like that's
Yeah.
what your brain has to be accustomed to.
And
I don't know if
increase
that's
anxiety too.
I don't know if you could reverse that because imagine you go from the ages of like 2 years old to 5, just scrolling TikToks and like that, those instant hits. It would be no different than having a kid sit at a slot machine and just constantly hit the buttons.
Yeah, I do think people are capable of healing their brains from like serious damage, but it would probably be going in the right direction if that was regulated. Even the emotional, like seeing people who are face tuned or behind video filters, like what that does for a teenager, like that's hard on adults, let alone teenagers.
What's been your experience with that? Because I know from my perspective, I don't really notice. I think it's more like, I don't feel like guys usually do like the Facetune sort of stuff.
Probably impacts girls more.
Yeah.
And from what I've read, especially teenage girls, being like, that's what I'm supposed to look like when you can't because it's not real.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good. And that definitely, like, let alone diet and our environment and things and like not having enough friends and not exercising, causing depression, that's going to cause depression too.
Did you feel like you fell into that same sort of trap of comparing yourself to other like face-tuned people online?
Yeah. I was at least older. Like when I kind of got exposed to that was more like 23, 24, which is a safer age than like 13 or 12. or 11. I think you have to be careful who you follow. I'm like better at it now.
I saw one, this is years ago, of I think it was one of the Kardashians where someone went through like all their photos and like pointed out exactly where they were altered. And it was wild. And some of them's like you see the lines just like kind of curve around.
And they're
like,
adjusting things that like you wouldn't even think of adjusting.
Right.
It's like completely like some random, indent that they want, and like they're, I don't know.
But me growing up, like being like 10 or 11 on the computer for the first time, like the thing back then was celebrities without makeup. And you would be able to go through like the 20s. Like,
no, I remember that too.
Totally different. And for me back then, I'm like, what? Without makeup? It's why, like as a kid, you start to even notice the differences on that.
I don't think like you assume people at a celebrity point are immune, like we talked about earlier, like, oh, tabloids, why would that bother them? But they're also just people. So they read the comments underneath.
Yeah.
Just like anyone reads comments underneath. And they're impacted. You do get desensitized after a while, for sure. But like, we're still social animals and like want other people to like us and things. So they're still impacted by what people say. Otherwise, they wouldn't use things like Facetune.
Speaking of, how do you keep your ego in check after getting very popular? And like, I know you guys grew up a little bit more on the poorer side and then acquiring a lot of wealth and having people like revere you for so many different reasons, like how they enjoy your belief systems and ideology. How do you not let that get to your ego?
It was probably harder to begin with because it's super exciting, right? Especially if you don't have a social media and then it starts growing. You're like, whoa, this is really cool. That novelty wore off. And then I'm probably kept in check by God mostly, not by like my own value of myself. Otherwise, I think it's probably impossible to keep it from going to your head. So I don't value, like compared to a number of years ago, I don't value the social media component as much as I value things that are actually happening in my own life. And I wouldn't necessarily attribute that to like choices I'm making necessarily. I would give credit to God for that.
How does God play into that exactly?
Just like changing what I'm attracted to. So I used to be attracted to making a lot of money. And that was, I think, partly because I grew up not having very much money, and partly because I was so sick that I was like, I can do this and I can prove myself. And making money shows people that you're valuable. And I think also being a girl, I was like, I don't know, attracted to that in a way that I probably shouldn't have been like attracted to it. And you know people who are obsessed with money, you shouldn't really like be like that. And so I think I was kind of like that, but it felt okay. Like it felt like I was poor and I'm trying to do good things and I'm like being successful and that's a good thing. But then I was ending up not paying attention to like more real things in my life. And it's not like I wasn't paying attention to them, but I wasn't obsessed with those things like I was obsessed with the goal of like being successful. And then when I started, like honestly, when I started reading the Bible more and felt more of a relationship with God and Jesus, that changed my heart to not valuing the more like vain aspects of my life as much. So like social media, money, that kind of thing.
Were you religious growing up, or was this something you discovered as an adult?
Like my dad always taught me the psychological significance of the Bible. So like very metaphorical, what Job, he's the one that he gets completely tortured by Satan. And he's like, he loses his kids and Satan, makes him very ill. And I was always like, oh, that like I kind of identify with that because I was so ill. And I learned about like Noah's Ark, and like everybody kind of knows about Noah's Ark and stuff. But I didn't pray. We didn't go to church. Like I went to church once with my grandma. Like no. And my dad wasn't religious and my mom wasn't religious. But when she had cancer, she almost died from cancer in 2019. And it was like a crazy rare cancer that like nobody has. And there were like 18 case studies and everybody died. It was really awful. She had surgery and then the surgeon like nicked something and it wouldn't heal and she was dying and she wasn't religious at all. And then like one day she goes, I'm going to be better by our anniversary. So my dad and my mom's anniversary. And we were like, okay, Mom, you're on a lot of morphine. Like that'd be great. And she goes for surgery in the US and it didn't work. And she comes back to Canada and on their anniversary, she just healed and nobody could understand why. And she was like, it was God, just like kind of out of the blue. And I was like, okay, that was strange. And I don't really know how to understand that. And she was just like, that was God. Like he spoke to me, he said he would do that. And it's been really since then that I've been like, oh, maybe these religious people aren't so crazy. Like maybe there's more out there than what I was thinking before.
How do you even start by becoming religious? Do you start by reading the Bible?
I started by reading the Bible, reading the Gospels, and then wanting it. Like I wanted it. I wasn't someone who was scoffing at it at that point. I like early on in my life, I was like, oh, Christians are like the homeschooled kids that think Harry Potter's evil. But I think I had so many hard things happen to me and like terrible things happen to me that I was like, if that were true, or if I believed that, like I want that. I want that faith that my mom has, because like she started to believe in God and Jesus. Her cancer healed, and then she became like a nicer, more like welcoming, more patient person. And I was like, that if I had that faith in something higher, that I think would be beneficial for me. So I had to want it. I wanted it. And then I started reading the Bible, and it was really like a couple years later that it just clicked, and I was like, okay, I get it. But I didn't get it for a long time. I was just reading the Bible. I tried to go to church a few times, but I was like, I don't really understand it. I don't really understand.
How has it changed your outlook today?
Well, I went into it a bit. Like a lot of what changed for me was I used to value different things than I value now. Like I've always wanted kids and things, but I was like, but I really want to be successful, and I want to build. Like we're building an app, Peterson Academy, an online education app, which is launching in like June. It's happening right away. And I was like, I want to be successful and to have money so that I could be one of these like billionaire people to try and change society for better. That was my aspiration. And that was because I was so sick and was like, we need to be teaching people not to eat processed foods, and just like something as simple as that. I was like, I want to get to the level of power that I can do that. So that was more my goal. And then since I got saved, I would say it's more family oriented. It literally switched to that. Even though I have all this business opportunity and the social media opportunity and things, it's just like I don't care as much. And I think I was caring about it in an unhealthy way, probably. You know, I hired somebody to do housekeeping and stuff. I wasn't just paying as much attention to that because those tasks kind of bothered me, and now they don't bother me as much. It was small changes like that. And then I'm also calmer overall and like happier. It was a very strange change going from somebody who grew up in like the middle of downtown Toronto and like thought Christians were
Does that
weirdos.
give you more purpose?
It's mostly calmness and joy. Like I was also the type of person that if anything bad happened to me, and a lot of bad things happened to me, I was like, what can I do to fix this? Like, what are all the ways I can do to fix this? Like when you have a work problem and you just try to attack it from every angle. And that happened when I was sick. I was like, I'm going to do everything to get better. And I eventually got to an all-meat diet and was like, okay, that seems to work. And my mom was always like, it's up to God. He'll figure it out. And I was always like, okay, but it's also kind of up to us because you can't just like sit there. You have to like do things. And I think now I can understand you should still do things, like not doing things just because you believe in God isn't the right way to act. But I know that it'll work out eventually. Like I don't have to push as hard as I was trying because it's not like reality isn't just up to me.
To me, that sounds like a lot more confidence, though. That you have the confidence that things will work themselves out.
Yeah, it's like faith.
And that's
faith that things will work out.
Also, it seems like very outcome oriented when you're placing like all of your emphasis on like how hard you're trying. And it's like, I'm only trying because I want a positive outcome. Whereas like if you know everything will be okay regardless, then it's like, obviously you can still try and you should still try, but knowing you'll be okay regardless of outcome is like a little bit.
Well, it's psychologically a huge relief.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, kind of like God's got me. We're fine. You don't just like drop everything. You're still going to go through hard things and try and figure them out, but you don't have to like stress out that your life is going to be over whenever anything bad happens.
Did you ever feel like when you were having conversations with your dad that he was like psychologically studying you?
Oh, yeah. Like every conversation forever and up until now.
You felt like it?
Well, I mean, he does this thing where I can't glare at you because I have Botox in my eyebrows, but like he glares at you and like studies you and like, it's like, yeah, and like thinks and puts his hand up here. Yes.
But then is he present in the conversation or is he focusing on the meta of the conversation? Like you're saying this, but you really mean this. You're saying this because of this. Like there's so many abstractions.
I feel like
he's
kind of in the meta, like you said.
Is he correct though? Because I kind of find myself doing the same thing and be like, oh, you're saying this, but that's because of this and this and this. You wouldn't be saying.
It's true though, because a lot of people will tell you something and it's not what they're trying to tell you. They're like alluding to things or they're like twisting the truth a little bit and you're like, no, what you mean is, or how you're feeling is. So I'd say it depends. Yeah, he's probably correct.
Does he ever just like cut right to the chase then? Like you say something, he's like, all right, I mean, I know what you're saying here.
Not as much anymore. I think since I've gotten older, I feel like he did that a lot when I was in my early 20s though.
Wouldn't that make it harder to connect though? Because it seems like there's different layers of the conversation rather than meeting on common ground.
Not really. Like I said, he brought things down to our level like throughout me growing up. He wasn't always high level. It was pretty high level, but we could still understand him. So no, we could still meet on common ground.
Do you think you've picked up on those tendencies?
I don't think so. Like I probably do what everybody else does in terms of trying to figure out why somebody's saying something or something like that, but not to the degree my dad does it. I'm not even capable of that. Like his level of thinking in the abstract and verbal fluency, like I'm not even on the same page. So I don't think that's something I could have just picked up on. I think you'd have to be born with that kind of level of thinking.
Do you ever feel like you're living in his shadow?
That's a tricky question a bit. Like I get that question quite a bit. Like, does it bug you or something? But like, it doesn't bug me. I don't really feel like that. I mean, there's comments on my podcast and comments online. They're like, oh, you wouldn't be where you are without your dad.
Right.
And I'm like, that's true. Obviously, like anybody whose sibling or parent gets famous is going to impact everybody around them. Like that's obviously true. I'm mostly grateful for it. So I'm not concerned about it. Do I feel like I'm living in a shadow? Like maybe a bit, but I don't care.
I tend to see kids of people who are well-known or very successful find it hard to live up to those expectations that people place on them. Or you always want to like do better.
Or they just throw it out the window entirely.
Yeah.
Right. They just want to like,
Yeah,
it's pointless to even try because like I'm going to be a failure in comparison. Or it's something where it's like I have to exceed what they've done so that way I could prove myself and then I have what it takes.
I probably had more of that. I think it was also easier because I helped build Dad's social media channels and I started like kind of taking a management position in 2018.
Oh, that was pretty early on.
Oh, it was really early on. So like he was putting videos on YouTube, but my brother helped start the podcast. I helped negotiate like speaking events and kind of help set him up with people who could get him touring. I set him up with a different publisher. I did Instagram and Facebook in like 2013, like super early, or 2014. So because we started working together early on, it was kind of like a family project. So it doesn't really feel like I got left behind, I think, because it was like, oh, I was helping.
Does it ever worry you? I hear so many people say you never want to work with your friends and family.
I've probably had the opposite experience. Like I talked about it a little bit earlier. So many people that I've met since 2017 that are like new people have been awful people. Like I didn't realize what percentage of psychopaths show up when you have any type of like money or wealth. You come across a psychopath every now and then as a regular person. And then the more assets you have, like the higher the percentage of psychopaths that show up.
Could you give us an example of that?
Well, just like briefly, we've had employees that we thought that were pretty close to our family that have turned out to have been like lying and stealing money. That's happened a ton of times. It's like every third person. It's crazy. It's been crazy bad. And so I was like, is it bad luck or is it just you have to be more selective about who you're with depending on who you are. And so is it worse to work with like family and friends? My experience has been no. Like most of the people I trust are from before 2017. And then my family trusts each other because we're family.
I feel like I've had the opposite experiences. Like everyone that I've met is like super trustworthy. But now we have a
maybe
very
we're
small
just not
team.
attuned to like
it takes like
detecting
3
that.
years.
Maybe that's it, man. I don't know.
I've found like with the people, and it's been a number of people, it takes like 3 years to find out. Because eventually you find out, but it takes a long time.
Yeah.
It's some people,
Like, Jack, that's an awful nice house, you know.
Oh, thanks, man.
That are longer, like 5 years. But eventually you're like, oh, you've been lying.
5 years? Okay, now we're cutting it close to the wire. Yeah, that's how long we've known each other.
You guys are probably okay.
Okay.
Probably.
You can
Find
never be
out
too
maybe in
sure.
a year or so.
Yeah.
Do you think modern dating is completely screwed?
I mean, it can't be completely screwed or people are completely screwed. So I don't think it's completely screwed. I think it's rough right now. I don't even know where you'd start. Like my ex I met online and that was
What app?
terrible. Plenty of fish.
Plenty of fish? So
Yeah.
what is that, like coffee meets bagel? That's like a one where you're going out to like find your soulmate?
It was supposed to be like that. But like meeting people online is shifty. That didn't work out. We won't go into details there, but it didn't work out. So what do you do? I don't know what you would do. I would say meet people in church. But I'm all like, That's the direction I'm going in right now. I think you can find good people there. I don't know about meeting people online. It's so tricky. Just like be careful, I guess. Go out for a lot of sober dates. Like don't go out for drunk dates. Yeah. That's a bad idea
do you think it's harder for men or women in terms of dating? Because it seems like women have way more choice, but the choice isn't that good. And men don't have a lot of choice. So they kind of take whatever they could get.
I don't know who it's harder for. I feel like it's harder for both sides right now. I think it's extremely hard for both sides. I think it's riskier for women because if like a woman ends up with a bad man, then they can go down like a route where they end up with kids and things, and like it's rough. And that's going to be rough for the man too. And so maybe I'm just talking about this from a female perspective, but even just getting pregnant makes it riskier for women. But I think both sexes are having a miserable time right now. I mean, it depends. If you're interested in a topic, like I'd probably get interested in some sort of niche and then try and meet people in that niche. That's probably the route I'd go. Or meet people through work and then meet them sober and judge them harshly.
Do you think dating apps are making it worse for people, harder to meet and have true connections with people?
Yeah, I think it's too easy. Like even with Tinder, and I haven't been on dating apps in like years and years, but even with Tinder, it was just like being able to swipe through what people look like without even knowing who they are that quickly can't be good for people, especially not from an evolutionary perspective. And like how many people did we used to meet? Not very many people. Now we have social media and you have all those options. It's crazy. Dad and I wanted to make a dating app. We're thinking of doing that after Peterson Academy.
That would be based off of the understand yourself criteria?
Yeah,
right?
we'd incorporate that into it so you could judge people's personalities, get matched to people who have like similar interests, but also the right compatible personality with you.
Do you think that would be a really successful metric to use? Is personality based, or do you think that there's something detached from that, just some like raw chemistry or values?
I mean, I don't think you can just be like, this is your personality and now we're going to mesh, but I think you can screen out a lot of people. So like you guys are extroverts, I assume.
No.
There's no way. There's no way you have a podcast.
He got
what did you get?
On the
totally
test.
Incorrect.
97.
There we go. Yeah. What did you get?
He got 70%.
I don't think so.
Still extremely extroverted.
Extrovert, on the questionnaire, it's like, how easy do you make friends? How easy is it to communicate with people? It's very easy for me. That
can be agreeableness too, those questions.
It's not, I was highly disagreeable. I came up during I was like really low. I think I was like 15 on disagreeable or whatever it is, like very low. My thing though is it's only because of the YouTube channel that people come up to me. It's really easy because they'll come up to me and be like, Graham, I watch your channel. I do this. And I just sit there and I listen, which I'm really good at listening. So I don't have to go up and like talk to people. But that to me is exhausting. Like my idea of a good night is like home alone.
I don't know if it's extroversion or not, but I will say I wasn't entirely shocked when I saw that.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm not an extrovert. I'm definitely not.
And the reason
definitely are more than the average person.
I could be in front of a camera. I'm talking to a camera. There's a few people in the room.
You're not talking to a camera at all.
I'm just saying, but like this is for a camera. I'm talking to a cat, but I'm just saying it's for camera. So it's easy for me to be like in front of a camera and I know that, okay, like for 3 hours, I gotta be my best self, get hyped up on coffee, and I could do this.
So if we go to an event, I would say this speaks introversion to me. We go to an event and let's just say it's an event. I know a lot of people that they're going to recognize Graham. They're like, oh my God, I'm such a big fan. Graham's gonna be like, okay, how do I like stay in the corners and away from everybody? Right.
Yeah.
So I can see that. And that sounds like introversion. However, I will say around the right people, you love talking. You really like when we're hanging out, usually I'll say he does a vast majority of the talking and I'll do a lot of the question asking. And he seems like he livens up.
Depends on the topic. If it's YouTube related, money related, or aquarium.
Relationships.
I love talking about it. Yeah, those 4 topics, great. Anything else, it's hard for me with small talk. That's the one.
That might be because you're disagreeable. Like disagreeable people will be like, small talk is stupid. I have better things to do. And that'll overtake some of the extroversion. Extroverts don't just want to talk to anybody. They like talking. If you're disagreeable, then you won't want to talk to everybody. But the
just
people you like talking,
yeah, that sounds.
I don't know.
That sounds.
And 15th percentile is pretty low.
In disagreeability.
Yeah, it scores on agreeableness, and 15th percentile is pretty low.
Jack was like the most agreeable person, and I was like the most disagreeable person, which is an interesting dynamic.
We have very flip-flopped results.
Oh, that's funny.
There are very few that were on par or similar. but we get along great. And so that's one of the things where it's like if you're trying to match people based on compatibility, it's
okay,
like...
so there's ways to get around that. You don't just match if you have the same personality. Now, sometimes that can work, but like neuroticism, which is how anxious you get, if you have a highly neurotic person, you should either just avoid them, no offense to anyone who's neurotic, but like, or you should match them with someone who's really low in neuroticism, because two neurotic people will just fight all the time or be anxious all the time. So those would have to be on the opposite. For extroversion, if you're going to have someone that's like at 97, if you go out with someone who's at like 5, they're going to want to stay home all the time, and you're going to start wanting to go out and seeing people and having the social time. That just long-term probably isn't going to last. So you probably want somebody similar in extroversion. But other aspects can change. Like agreeableness, you can have someone highly agreeable with someone with very low agreeableness. And you can have 2 very low in agreeableness people. And 2 high in agreeableness people.
I tend to think the older I get, the more disagreeable I become. Because I'm kind of set in my way.
He's going to be the guy that like yells at the kids as they're like running in the streets. Hey, you're running too fast. Or the people that go down the road in their car. Your car's too loud. And he's going to sit on his bench and do that.
I can kind of see that, to be honest.
I can see that too. Like, it's probably pretty accurate.
That's totally fine. There needs to be those people in neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm. It's a staple.
Yeah.
Is there any personality trait that's just objectively bad?
Honestly, neuroticism isn't great. Like women are like on average more neurotic than men. So they score like on average 60 and men score on average 40 percentile, 90 plus. They're like highly sensitive, very like volatile, irritable. It's the measure. If you're scoring above 90, I would say you should look into see whether or not you're depressed, and then that's skewing the results. Because some people with depression score really high, and then when they're not depressed, they score lower.
And is this stuff that's like coded into you? So for example, you take the test when you're like 15, it's likely to be similar by the time you're 70. It's not anything that like you can actually make a change. So for example, you take it, you're not depressed, but you're like 85 neuroticism, and you're like, okay, well, I guess, I'm just probably not going to have many friends.
It depends. Openness you can change with psychedelics. They've done studies on psychedelics, and if you take them, your openness levels will go up. So that's interesting. Neuroticism can change whether or not you're depressed. So if like one of your family members just died and you take a personality test, it's probably going to skew the results. The other ones though are pretty stable. So I started taking these tests before they were online from my dad, and my personality has stayed remarkably stable throughout, from like 13 to now, other than the neuroticism, which went way down after I got healthy and off of all the medications.
Now, I'm curious, slightly separate from that, when you met your husband, did you immediately know it was the right fit?
Pretty much, yeah. So it was really fast. Like we met and got married 3 months later.
3 months?
Yeah, 3 months.
How many times did you guys see each other in that 3 month period? It was
a lot. Like it wasn't like if you knew someone for like years and you saw them like once a week or something, you could have just combined that in that 3 month period. Like we saw each other every day.
Do you think it's important to like know someone for over an extended period of time?
Normally, yeah, because there's psychopaths everywhere.
Because you just said it took like 3 to 5 years to see if they're stealing money.
I know.
And this is a person you work with. Like...
This is fair. This is fair. Don't smile at me. It's fair. I knew with my current husband. And partly that's because like I was 29 at that point. So I'd like met people. It wasn't like 22 or 23 and naive. And I'd met people. So I was like, no, this is right. And he's got like a unique combination of personality traits that like matched mine. Like he's extroverted. He's very entrepreneurial. Like he wants to build things. He's super smart. So these are things that are rare. It's hard to find people. Like I feel bad for people dating nowadays.
Was it a logical decision for you where you kind of looked at the personality traits and the qualities and said, this is what I want? Or was it an emotional reaction where it's like you just... a gut level, this is it?
It was mostly emotional, but then the logic also helped.
Sure.
So it was mostly emotional. Like we met, we stayed up talking all night. He's probably more extroverted than me, which is like difficult. So that kind of like lined up, and you could just tell that from having a conversation with someone if you hit it off and it's like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth for hours. So like that happened. But then it was also, I like poked and prodded around to get more information. I was like,
did you
okay,
test?
He's smart. I think he'd done the personality test like before.
No, like run your own tests. Like I know that's like a thing that some like girls can do.
So
what do you mean run your own tests?
Like here's a really poor example of one, but like let's say the guys at a bar or whatever, and the girl sends her friend
Oh my
over to like
gosh.
go like hit on the guy or something like that, or like, you know, do I look weird in this something or whether, you know what I mean? Like,
well,
and poking and prodding.
Kind of. He told me he wanted to marry me like a month after we met. It was really fast. And I was like, okay, you have no idea what you're getting into, right? Like, you don't know me very well. I was like, I'm divorced. I have a kid. I like run my dad's companies. I work all the time. I was like, I never want to do laundry. I like basically threw everything that was like, there's a lot of baggage here. So I guess that was kind of a test. It was like, here's all the reasons that like, this is going to be not as easy as you think it is, maybe. And he was like, that's fine. I was like, okay.
I can imagine it would be honestly really intimidating to enter the Peterson family. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there would be a lot of psychoanalyzing going on, and like, especially like meeting the family.
You know what my mom said? We were FaceTiming and I was at the cottage and I was like, oh, this is Jordan. His name's Jordan too, by the way.
Nice.
So if that's going to be made fun of, it can happen now.
Awesome.
But thank you. You are the agreeable one. She takes a look at him and goes, are you gay? That was the first thing she said.
Why did she say that?
She wanted to see if he had a sense of humor.
Oh, that's funny.
It wasn't like, there was no way that was a serious question. She was just like,
did he take
poke,
offense
like
to
just
that?
see. No. Which is good because like can't be easily offended around my mom. I don't know. He's not overwhelmed very easily, so I don't think he was worried about it. And my dad's way nicer. Like he doesn't like really.
I feel like
I know. No,
you'd
my
think
dad's
that he'd be
so
very
nice.
intense and
Yeah.
like, what do you want out of life? Are you know what I mean? Are you going to treat my daughter right?
Not really. He's pretty nice. Like when we had parties or anything, or I had friends come over, they were initially scared of my dad because he's loud. They'd be like, oh, your dad's scary. And then they'd like meet my family. They'd be like, oh, your mom is scary.
Really?
But you'd think he'd be hardened by everything that's gone on.
He's not.
How?
I don't know. Like even from people coming in, like new employees or something, where we find out they're like conning us. I was like, we can't trust people. We have to be like aware. And he's just like, nope. I don't know how he's not hardened. He's just like a nice, compassionate guy.
Was your husband a fan of your dad beforehand? And how do you get so much trust in such a short amount of time?
So we'd been working together a bit. We'd been working together. So I like knew him a little, but it wasn't like romantic at all. I just like knew him. I was still in Toronto. I was considering moving to Austin. I knew he lived in Austin. So I was like, oh, you can show me around Austin. And he like drove around showing me all the homeless people. And I was like, who is this weirdo? I was like, this isn't a tour of Austin I wanted. I think the older you get, especially as a female, because I know I was super naive when I was like 23, 24 and didn't know how to judge people at all. And I'm just getting better at it the older I get. I could just kind of tell. Like you have this intuitive sense as a girl if you're with someone and they make you feel safe. And it's not really logical. It's really intuitive. And I think it's built in to keep you away from like dangerous men. And so I was around him and I was like, oh, you make me feel safe. I haven't felt that really. That was a big part of it. And then we'd work together and then we got along really well. And then we spent all our time together. So it wasn't like we were seeing each other 2 or 3 times a week or 2 times a week. It was like all of our time together. And if you spend all of your time together, even in like a 3-month period, it's quite a bit of time. But that would be fast, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for people.
Was there ever a financial imbalance between the two of you? You obviously running a very successful business.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
How do you navigate that?
You know what? I think because I was already set financially, I wasn't necessarily looking for somebody with that. Like I think in a normal like male to female relationship, they're probably looking for somebody who can provide for them in a financial way more than I would have been. I was like, I'm set. I'm good. I've taken care of myself. Like I don't really need anybody. So I was also in a good place to like enter a relationship because I was like, I'm not like I'm lonely. And I want to be with somebody, but I don't need somebody. He's also taken a lot off my plate. Like I wanted to marry somebody who could, this was the other thing I told him when I was trying to scare him away. I said, because we were already working together and he was like, I was slowly giving him more things to do, being like, can you also handle this? Can you also handle that? And I was like, whoever I marry, I want to be able to work with. And I don't know if that's normal for a relationship, but I was like, if I'm going to be with somebody, I work all the time, like all day on things. And I'd rather be working with like my husband. Otherwise, I'm going to be working with other like men most likely all day. And over that like first three-month period, he took a lot off my plate and I was watching and seeing if he could handle it because I've tried to give a lot of my work away before, like I said, and it's been like, oh, this is too complicated for you. And that's like, talking to lawyers or negotiating contracts or just like things you think that, I don't know, people could just do that not everybody can do. Even it's like you guys have a podcast and it's like successful and you're like, well, anyone can do this. They can't. And so I gave him more and more and could see how competent he was. Money-wise, we weren't on the same footing ground, but he's better at negotiating business and running things than me, which is a huge relief. So I've been able to give a bunch of work away.
It's funny. I'm the opposite of that. I would not want to work with my spouse. And
Why though?
I'm a difficult person to work with. I think Jack could attest to that I am very picky, highly disagreeable. I want things done a certain way. And the last thing I want is to like have a relationship that's intertwined.
What if they
work.
agreed with you though? So this is what I scored, by the way. I scored first percentile in agreeableness.
So you're like a 99 or whatever the top score is, the most agreeable.
No, I'm first percentile. That's
the least most
extremely disagreeable.
Yeah.
Which I think is why I've been able to handle like all meat diet and like some controversy with just being like, screw you. I'd like whatever. But Jordan and I don't really disagree on things. So when I first started working, it was definitely a transition because I didn't want to give away some things because I was like, some of these are mine and I built them and they're like my babies and you can't have them. But we agree on most business decisions. If it was someone I didn't like agree with, that would be a problem. We agree on most. And when we disagree, he's right a good percentage of the time. And it's like, okay, that ended up being valuable. I feel like if you find something like that, if you have someone you're working with and they're annoying or they're just slowing you down, it's the worst thing in the entire world for a relationship. I think like we're in a unique position, which is why when I told him when I was trying to scare him away, I was like, this is a lot that I'm expecting here. I didn't think I was going to get married after I got divorced. I was like, there's way too much baggage and there's like a specific thing I'm looking for. And
is that like a thing that women experience after divorce?
100%. I had so many, after I started talking about the divorce or just told people I was divorced, my belief, and I think that's from growing up in a more conservative family, my belief was, okay, I'm just going to be single because I have a kid and I don't have any value. Like I literally, that's what I thought. And I had a bunch of people, especially more conservative women, who haven't even told people that they're divorced or that they have a kid. They haven't admitted that on social media, who are like, I'm going to be alone forever. And they're like 26. I was like, you're a very attractive woman and you're very successful. Like that's just a lie you've been sold. So yeah, that I fully believed that. Like I was okay with it. I was like, I'd rather be alone than in a bad relationship.
When should people end a relationship? At what point? Because I know there's a difference between, you make a commitment to somebody and you want to work through those problems, but then there are also some problems that you can't work through or that aren't worth working through.
Like it's hard to say. I think if you're getting danger vibes from the person you're with as a woman, that you should really pay attention to that, even if you can't understand why. Because I think that's built into us. And so don't ignore that. And then I would say don't just get married unless you really, really want it. It's a lot easier to end a relationship if you're not married. Definitely try not to have a kid with that person because that just screws up everything. But if you're in a situation where you find out that person is lying, even like small lies, I think then like be on your guard and maybe like address those lies. And if they don't fix themselves, I would leave.
So lying in any circumstance is unacceptable.
Yeah, but I find that people who lie, they don't lie about one thing. They lie about like everything a little bit.
They're comfortable with lying.
Yeah, and or and I know gaslighting is super overused, but if they're saying, oh, this happened, you're like, I don't remember that. And you're like, oh, no, just trust me, that happened. That kind of behavior and like lying about things, I'd say like get out regardless.
What about just not bringing up something? Maybe it's bothering you. You have some thought or something and it pops into your head every once in a while, but it'll ignite some big, argument or whatever. And you're like, what? It's not really worth it. This is probably a me problem. It makes me a little uncomfortable, but I'm just not going to.
I used to be like that, especially when I was in a bad relationship. I was like that a lot. It was like I didn't really understand how I was feeling and didn't want to hurt feelings and stuff. I don't do that ever anymore. So if there's something bugging me and I'm worried about the repercussions, I say it anyway, regardless of the outcome, like every time, because it's a form of lying, but mostly because those problems don't, even if it is a you problem, then say like, hey, this bugged me or I'm concerned about this. It might all be me, but like, can we talk about it a little bit to see if I'm the problem here or if this is a problem we should work through? And I think 100% of the time that's better to do. Otherwise, you don't say it and then they just sit in your like soul and like fester there and they never go away. So you can't just like forget about something that, it depends. If you're like a volatile person and they did something and you're like, okay, let me give it a week and then see if I'm still irritated by it, and you're not, that's different. But if it's something repeated that you're just not mentioning, I think seriously bring it up. Because if you can't communicate with like your spouse or your girlfriend about tiny things that bother you, then like how are you going to be deeply in love? And you shouldn't be in a relationship where you're worried about hurting their feelings. Like if you're, and I think that happens more probably for men because like women are a bit more sensitive, but it happens for women with men as well. If you're with someone and you're worried about hurting their feelings all the time, then probably find somebody else as well, because that's exhausting.
But part of me wonders, like, people can have a natural predisposition to being okay with higher levels of discomfort and secrecy, right?
Oh, yeah.
And if they're truly hardwired that way, then it's like, okay, well, just let them be. If it works for them, then you know what I mean? Like, I can't say in a dogmatic way that you need to be completely transparent about every single problem that you have in this relationship for everybody out there, because certain people are just coded differently.
I think I disagree with that. People who are super agreeable, and I scored weird on agreeableness. It splits into compassion and politeness. I scored first percentile in politeness. So I didn't score first percentile in agreeableness. I scored like 83 on compassion. So I ended up more like a 40 or something with agreeableness. So I know I said that wrong earlier. It was politeness where I scored really low.
Politeness?
Yeah.
So you offered me this before we got started?
Politeness is more like, politeness is a
being
bad word for it.
Maybe. Right?
Yeah, it's more like not being blunt.
I scored high in the bluntness.
You did?
I did.
He's very blunt.
Okay. That's what I did.
Apparently,
Apparently
it's been an issue. I don't know.
I mean, it's only an issue once you, before you get to know him.
It comes off harsh, I think. So some people might take it the wrong way. So sometimes people come to me and, what do you think of this? I'm like, it sucks. It's really bad.
And if your compassion is also low, then you also don't really care as much about how they feel when you say something like it sucks. I'd rather give people the honest
answer is my thing. It's like, hey, if this sucks,
I think
I'm
that's
just
better.
Say it's bad.
I think that's better, but I do feel bad.
I don't know if it's better. I think be honest, right? So like if you don't like something, be like, hey, look, I'm not going to lie. That's not my favorite. Here's something that can maybe like improve it.
See, that's what I would do.
Boom, that sucks.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I'd do something more like that.
I've told Jack that, like, I talk to people how I want to be talked to. And so if I show somebody something, I would love for them to say, I hate it.
And so do you want other people to talk to you the way that they want you to talk to them? I just, if you assign that same standard to everybody else,
it's just what I know. It's just what I know.
It's an agreeableness thing.
That's all it is.
So my husband, super disagreeable. And he'll do the same, like, brutally honest thing where I was like, okay, that made that person uncomfortable. And because that person's uncomfortable, now I'm uncomfortable. So maybe we like just tone it down a little bit.
Oh, I get that. Yeah.
So he's like, well, I'm just telling them the truth. I'm like, okay, but like,
it's funny. I've had the exact conversations with Macy. Sometimes I just think maybe they're fine, and she says, no, you hurt their feelings. I'm like, no,
yeah.
I did.
Same conversation.
Macy's no, they're totally fine. She's extremely polite.
Yeah,
extremely polite. But I was like, no, that wouldn't hurt their feelings. No, that's dumb. It's like
that's exactly and it does.
It's interesting.
Usually.
Yeah,
I've had those disagreements with Jordan, and then their feelings are hurt. And I'm like, see, other people are like that sometimes. But
interesting.
But back to what you said about like not saying things. Agreeable people are more likely to become resentful over time. I learned this from my dad. So they're less likely to say things that are bothering them because they can put up with like kind of burdening themselves rather than burdening the other person. That's just what agreeable people are like, super compassionate, super polite, and they want everybody to like be calm and happy and very pleasant to be around, usually agreeable people. Yeah, but over time, if you don't bring up these things, they'll also get resentful. And that happens a lot with women who are super agreeable. They'll go out of their way to do things for other people. Like, hey, would you pick this up for me? Hey, would you do this? And they'll be like, yeah, sure, that's no problem. And eventually they'll be like, hey, you spent the last 5 years asking me to pick up your socks, and I've hated it the entire time, and snap. Now, I'm not saying all agreeable people will do that, but I'm saying if you're agreeable, you're more likely to get resentful over longer periods of time. So you should still bring up things that are bothering you. Because usually just talking to people, you can frame it in a way that's like puts a bunch of the blame on yourself too. Like, hey, I'm kind of feeling a little bit weird about this. It's probably my fault. Like, how do you feel about this? And then at least it's out in the open. I firmly believe that after going through a divorce and doing like the complete wrong thing. Should have addressed a bunch of things a lot earlier that were in my head. And I was just like, it's probably me. I don't think it was me now. But at the time, I was like, it's probably me. I should just like, think differently or something. And then you want someone you can be open with. Otherwise, relationships are no fun.
I agree. I think you can say the exact same thing in two completely different ways.
You can.
And get different responses. And it's kind of just about reading the situation.
Yeah.
And knowing that certain people are receptive to different sorts of like, okay, I want to transmit information that we should change this aspect. And different people are receptive in different ways. And you kind of have to figure out the language and then play that game a little bit. Like I know I have to approach Graham differently if I want to enact change than I have to approach, let's say, my mom or something like that. It's just 100%. Completely different.
I think that's just normal. And if you can I think if you're agreeable to you're better at reading that. I think, although I'm not taking that from anywhere.
Here's the thing. I think there are very few people out there, maybe Graham's an anomaly, but very few people out there where if you say something very bluntly, it comes off as accusatory. And I think people have a natural gut reaction to recoil at that. And I think that's just coded in our DNA. It's like, okay, well, you're not one of us, you're one of them. And so that's why I think if you're actually trying to engage in persuasive speech, you can't alienate the other person or say something that is even, received as accusatory, right? And maybe you're not transmitting it in an accusatory way, but it's being received that way. And if you have a goal that you want to achieve, then you have to understand how they receive information and then play that game. And I just think generally speaking, saying something super bluntly and harshly is not going to yield the desired outcome.
I basically agree with that. I think, so I'm way more likely to change what I'm saying so that it'll be received by the other person in a more positive way, even if the underlying message is the same. Rather than Jordan, that'll just be blunt and he'll just say the message, right? But my compassion, and I think that's what it falls under for agreeableness, was high enough that I could have actually been a bit blunter. And I've seen that with how he speaks, because sometimes he'll be a little bit less blunt. I could be blunter and get a better response from people. And I was actually overdoing it on the niceness, especially in work and being taken seriously in work. I was writing emails in a way where people just weren't taking me as seriously because I wasn't being as authoritative, because I was being overly polite, because I'm compassionate. And so it depends on the situation, right? But I think for people who score really high in agreeableness, they can tone it back to get more towards the mean, more towards the average person, and it would benefit them.
And what's your recommendation for someone who's blunt and someone who's disagreeable? My husband's super disagreeable. I like it. I find it refreshing. I would say though, if you're around, this is what I tell him too. I can usually pick up on it more easily than him though, with certain employees where I'm like, if you say it that way, it's going to hurt their feelings. And he's like, no, it won't. Just exactly what. And then it does. And it'll be like, see. But then it'll have to happen 4 times. How do you know if it hurts their feelings?
I will say, I want to add this stipulation here. If you just say flat out, yeah, I don't like it, versus I don't like it because X, and you point out a very specific thing that can universally be seen as, okay, that's probably not the best way to. So I'll send him an intro that I devised for one of our podcasts, and he's like, it sucks. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you want me to work on? If you were to you need it that. Sucks, but I would change the text font to this.
Yeah.
And I think it would look better. I'll be like, okay, I can actually do something about this.
And so to give Jordan credit, that's what he does.
It's not harshness, right? But it's harshness with a shared goal, because I have the same goal as him. I want to make a banger intro. But if it's just flat out, this sucks, it's okay, well, thanks a lot.
See, when I'm thinking about it, I'm not thinking anything about Jack. I'm thinking this intro itself is not good. So to me, I kind of separate. It's the intro versus Jack's effort. I detach the two. I'm like, this intro sucks. This is horrible. But I don't think Jack.
For the record, I don't come up with horrible intros anymore.
No. But something like that, I detach the person from the thing.
That's
so if I see a horrible thumbnail, I'm like, that's awful.
Yeah,
but I don't think anything of the person.
I think that's just a disagreeable thing to do. Is objectively, whatever you said wasn't quite right, or whatever you did wasn't quite right, without attaching it to the person. That's interesting. I don't think that way.
Okay.
I always attach it to the person. And you were saying, how do you tell them when it's going to hurt somebody's feelings? I can feel their discomfort. So if you're in a conversation, you're saying something and they'll make certain movements, or their voice will go up a little bit. I can feel that.
Maybe
So
I
if
don't-
like,
He's not
I'm
very
uncomfortable.
I feel
He's
like
not
I'm
attuned
really
to that.
I feel like I'm really good at reading people.
No, here's the thing.
You
that
suck,
was the
Graham.
disagreeableness
You
right
suck.
there. That was the disagreeableness. But like, we'll have guests that come over to the house to come shoot a podcast. There have been multiple occasions where the guest comes up to me and they say, is it just me or I feel like Graham doesn't really like me? And they say that to me.
Oh,
And I'm like, no, trust me. When you walk in and he doesn't greet you and he's just like tinkering with his aquarium, it's because he's in his little world and he's happy. It's not the fact that he doesn't like you.
so you weren't joking about aquariums.
No.
That's
being
disagreeable.
1,000%
That's
serious.
agreeableness. Yeah.
So it's not that. It's just like they feel like he doesn't give them the attention. He doesn't like them or whatever. And I do think you're not super attuned to like, what
Maybe,
other
yeah.
people are feeling in a conversation. And he's generally
Could be.
pretty
He probably
polite.
doesn't care. Like the lower in agreeableness you are, you probably don't care. My mom's pretty low. Like for a woman, she's low. She scored 30 and she didn't score high in compassion. Like she just scored 30. It's low. It's kind of like average man. And she didn't really care. She'd say things that were true and harsh and blunt. She'd say them to my friends sometimes and they'd like be uncomfortable and she just wouldn't feel it or care. And I would feel it. And so I'd be like, well, I don't want to feel that. So like, can you make your words change a little bit? So I think that's just agreeableness. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And then I would say to somebody like that like, hey, maybe it would, make you better off if you were to care a little bit. But I think like by virtue of being disagreeable, even that can't like persuade them because they're like, you're wrong.
Nah. Yeah.
You know
yeah.
what I
Yeah.
mean?
It might be
That's just like a one-way stop,
I think the
road
only
stops there.
like the only way you'd change any type of behavior is by making mistakes and seeing a pattern and being like, okay, when I do X, this happens. And then you'd be able to convince yourself it's not a good idea. I feel like I'm like that too. I don't necessarily take suggestions from other people. I do, but like it's nice to make my own mistakes and then see how that played out.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the
Really
podcast. We
appreciate it.
really appreciate it. Also, thank you guys for helping us out here. That this setup is absolutely amazing. I don't even know how
1,
many
2,
cameras.
3,
Lots of
4.
cameras. I'm sure it's going to look great. So we really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you
We'll
guys
link
for
to all
watching.
your info in the description.
Okay, perfect.
So-
It was nice meeting you guys.
Oh,
That was
nice
fun.
meeting you
too.
Till next time.
See ya.